Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Double Swing. It's been about a week since we last spoke to you, and it's quite the turnaround on the scoreboard. Now, we're only obviously 2 weeks into the show, basically. We've had 2 episodes, and things have gone perfectly for me, terribly for everyone else, and that's wonderful. Joining us this week to try and, I think, change the narrative for the viewers slash guests is Skriv. He has been on the show before, but it was a long, long time ago, so I don't even remember how well you did or how poorly you did. Do you remember how that went for you last time?
Yeah, I don't think it went too well. It kind of opened and you were like, oh, you've chosen to go first. That's pretty bold. And then I just had like an existential crisis for the entire show. You were like, do you know how a snake draft works? And I was kind of like, yeah, I think so. And then we got into it and I was like, actually, I'm maybe out of my depth. But I've done a lot of learning since then.
Right.
However, I have still committed, I guess, with
yeah,
that.
you did.
But
you chose to go first again, which we'll see how it goes this time. Maybe you've got your game theory on point. Maybe you've got, some pocket picks you'd like to exploit. Hey, there could be a variety of different things. Now, before we get into this episode, we have to quickly recap what happened last week and talk about the scoreboard. So last time we picked our picks for the playoffs of Blast Bounty. I got in Parivision and Furia, which amounted to 5 points. Lovely, delicious 5 points. YouM3 with his picks of Gamer Legion and Spirit. They combined for a total of 1 because the underdogs, as we said, all got 1 point by default, so there was no wrong answer technically. And finally, our guest, Neokai, got 2 points, 1 for Vitality, getting a single win, and 1 for Heroic for showing up. So that's very nice for him. But that brings us to a scoreboard of 7 points for me, 3 for YouM3, and 3 for the guests. So far, so good. A 4-point lead. If I can maintain that for the rest of the year, I'll be delighted.
Real ones will know, though, that I picked Parivision going into the from the online stage into that, and I was like, I could have picked Parivision, but I decided I was going to stray from the path, and James has punished me for those sins, so it's my own fault, really. I've only myself to blame.
As I said on Twitter, defectors from Jamestown will not be accepted back into the nation. You are barred entirely. You should have remained on the train.
You used to slate me for religiously picking VP, so
Electronic
you're clearly not a part of this either.
He was a traitor who weaseled his way into the party and should have been excommunicated decades ago.
Yeah, that usurper will not be forgiven.
Exactly. That was Electronic. That was not James. Clearly, we have more than enough evidence now that Electronic is a bigger problem than James can really solve. Skriv, you are going first. This is a play-in style event, so just because I know people get confused about the points, so everyone here is worth 1 point. If you make it through, you're worth a point. All picks. Lead us off. Where are we going with this?
There's kind of, I think, just also to maybe like give us the opportunity, because I feel like maybe chomping at the bit, at least myself. They would come from the underdog side of things. I'm just going to slam it straight with Parivision. I'm a very, very big fan of obviously what they put down just now at Bounty in the finals, and such a, I don't know, not an amazing run, but obviously like ahead of expectations. And the finals certainly taking what seemed to be a bit of a cleaner Falcons in 3, is really quite impressive. So I think that we're talking about James. We kind of want to get in there and really give the flowers to this squad. Obviously, a full project that everyone's been talking about. I think Maui made a really good point on the desk that everyone's been harping on the fact that it's like, oh, they live together and they're like super dedicated, and it's been a year and a half of grinding for this team. Lots of like different changes and whatnot. But that is also, he said, what everyone is expected to do. So maybe not leaning on that too much. But I'm really quite happy with what's happening in this team. I think that James, it's pretty funny in a way, right? Just slamming bomb sites where the weaker players like to play and just sort of abusing that is kind of a bit of a based way to IGL. They all seem to, again, which maybe was missing from like the tail end of VP and everything. There's a lot of this buy-in with the exit interview, like the winners interviews, they were all thanking James and Dastan and whatnot, and a lot of it is down to them. So I think that this team is really in prime position to potentially upset where things are at in the top 10 at the moment. There's a few teams, that really do need maybe a fire lit under them. This team could be that. And there is also, I think, coming into the start of the season here, space for one of these teams that you have to keep an eye on. We talked a lot kind of at the awards, and I know you guys have touched on in previous episodes, a few of the top teams kind of see this as a boot camp, as a glorified practice, maybe potentially an argument that's like lent on a little bit too much, but it does apply, and I think we maybe saw it in a few teams. So Parivision are a squad that's going to sort of go under the radar and you think squeak through, but still winning the thing is no mean feat for sure. So yeah, I'm definitely behind them. I think that for this stage now, there's two things that I maybe worry about, in the fact that a bit of travel associated, right? I'm sure that they won that final immediately on the plane to Poland. But also I think there is potential that they get a little bit figured out, just in the sense that there was, yes, a lot of solid kind of buy-in and really good team play, around Jame and what they're building. But some of it did feel in places a little gimmicky. And I think that if you just kind of get ready for that going into the matchup, you potentially can be ready for Parivision, let's say. However, they're against Heroic for that first game, so I think that could also make a difference. But yeah, so Parivision, I'm just straight in there with it, and hopefully also give the table a chance to talk over this team.
Yeah, I think there's even a little bit of information that Dastan's given us where, listen, people looked back at, the early years of Donk before he had his, big Katowice breakthrough and his tier 1 explosion. Virtus Pro ran into Donk and Spirit a fair few times, and almost every time that they played, Donk was somewhat mitigated. That just seems to be a philosophy that has carried over from the Dastan and Jame circulation with VP, and it's something that they've transferred quite well. I think the framing was by people like Maui, or the way you've discussed it here as well, is like, yeah, they are just targeting the weaker bomb sites, they're targeting the weaker pieces, but I think it's more just that they're avoiding the better pieces more so, and making their fights as boring or as annoying on timings as humanly possible. But I think even if you look at that Parivision final versus Falcons, you saw many times, especially in that Inferno, where they were getting flanked on their default before they set up rounds, before they really got into the flow of their next motion. Falcons were making information plays because that's not exactly how they typically win rounds. Falcons are not always the most proactive on CT sides to always find these flank timings, but they actually abused or found a gap that Parivision didn't necessarily account for. And I think that's, the fact that Dastan came out in an interview and kind of said like, hey, when, it's definitely a part of our game planning. When people kill someone like Donk or a superstar, it's very expressly said that is the guy that is dead, and that we can, play around the rest of the round, knowing that he is no longer a factor. A lot of these top teams, and this is not a period of the event where they have to necessarily worry about superstars so much, but a lot of these teams are probably just going to look at that and think, okay, who is likely to be targeted as the person they want to avoid or make their life difficult? And how do we displace that? You probably just circulate them around the map, or trade spots, or play on spawns a bit more frequently. And I imagine there's a few more cracks will show for Parivision. I think Jamie even said in the interview, like, the harder part now is that because people now see them as a threat, maintaining that threat throughout, because he understands that there will be periods of stagnation. There will be periods where they're probably going to see a bit of a downturn, even at this event from a tactics point of view, because people are going to be more prepared. So, those are the great concerns. Those are very valid concerns, I think, for Parivision. But they're also a team that's a little bit hard to anti-strat necessarily. You can't get ahead of what they're going to do. You can only try and make their read on you worse.
Yeah, which is a very difficult thing to balance, right? And that's what I was going to get into, because, yes, I understand the concern of, oh, now people are going to watch us. Like, yeah, that's always the problem when you're an underdog shooting up. It's like, oh, now the people can take us seriously. Now we're number 4 on VRS. We're going to be at every event, making every playoff. We're expected to. People are going to actually prep us. A lot of the stuff I saw that was really positive from this side isn't really preppable. It's a great mid-round. It's a great adjustment. Yeah. It's like the very first gun round of Inferno that I broke down earlier today on Retake the Week, where I was like, just watch this. They throw a B hit in a 5v4. They see a set of util to counter retake top and on, immediately just start walking to A. Like the confidence James has in his read, and also the quality of his read in 90% of rounds, is just so high that, yeah, they can get the prep a bit wrong. They can leave gaps in their default and get, flanked by a team they'd clearly prepped and not expected that kind of aggressive info play from. But they can still react very well. They're very composed. They've always had that sort of gene in them. When you're talking James Dastan, sorry, that meme just keeps coming back to mind. It's been ever present ever since they came back. But those two have always had that element of, we're going to be a very composed team who can, on a dime, change things up at the last second of the round. Abuse the last 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 15 seconds. We're very happy to operate under those conditions, in those parameters. They've thrived. So I still see this team as very dangerous coming into any event for the next 6 months, especially given now that they have cushion, they have leeway. They've beaten the top teams, taken the biggest prize, had a huge injection of prize money. Their VRS is looking magnificent. They can coast for the entire year pretty much off the back of this victory, as long as they don't, go last place, last place, last place, last place. They'll be very comfortable in this sort of top 10 range. So, no, this is a good problem to have. Like, people are going to start watching us. We're going to have to start working on other things. Start making sure we can disguise what we're doing a little better. Maybe, change up the way we use this player every now and then. Oh no, that's your problem? Your problem isn't that you have to go through the online stages of all this crap in the future. You don't. They've got a problem of luxury. So I'm quite happy with that pick, Skriv. I'll be honest. I expect them to waltz through this period, or this section rather. Sure, their opening matchup is Heroic, who I also think are a bit of a threat. Then if they win that, they probably have to face like an Aurora. There's no freebies, there's no layups, but then now in matchups they know they can win. They have edges left, right, and center between the talents they have, the calling they have. They've just got a lot of tools to work with, and I think they're going to be a pain in the ass for everyone to play. Will they make top 4 at every event, win every event? Probably not. That'd be a bit much. The team is still a little rough around the edges in terms of the individual output. It's like, will we get a 150 nota or a 0.8 nota? Will we get, a triple kill on every entry's yellow or almost unnoticed yellow? There's still some things to work out in terms of the team's firepower, but everything else looks so on point, so ready, so primed to allow these players to express and show up and show off. Yeah, they're good for the rest of the year. They should be making it through this event, or this stage at least, and then we'll see. When we get to the Krakow main event, we can have some more difficult conversations about how deep they'll actually go. But for now, yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add on. I think they're also a bit of a symptom of like what can be done in the VRS era, right? They obviously have like an organization behind them that has maybe the finances, but also just the respect, I think, given to the project, and lots of moves have actually happened and little bits here and there. They jump at Sve to get him like in the team and everything, so really appreciative of that, and that it can kind of work from the tier 2, like given the resources and the ability and the power, they can find a couple of individuals they can feel like they're working towards something sort of legitimate. I mean, that's a lot of, I think, what the hopefully not Cinderella story, but that's definitely what it was for Bounty behind this team, like what they've been able to build and achieve, and put your heart in the right place. And there's a few other teams obviously in a play-in like this that maybe those orgs are not quite as committed, or there's not as many moves coming in from the teams themselves, the players themselves. And I think that they really are just kind of a symptom of hopefully also what is like a newer generation of teams. And I think that we will see this year not necessarily completely turn upside down, but there's going to be a few of those more legacy style orgs that I think are going to just have the ground taken out from under them, and teams like Parivision will be heading up, these kind of changing of the guard, so to speak. And I don't know, this is a little bit, not as relevant to the teams necessarily, but I feel like this most recent update, the game feels very, very different. To me personally, I don't know if you guys have felt something similar. So I do think that there will be quite a big change up this year in that sense.
I've played one deathmatch since the update. I've watched a lot of broken demos since the update, which is pissing me off. I don't need to see that fucking Zippo in full HD every time someone throws a molly. But no, I haven't actually played it, so I don't really understand what could be feeling different. Yumi, I don't know about you, but I've not played enough.
Well, I mean, they changed a few things with like how jumping interacts and how B hops are calculated, so there's something slightly different there. I do
want to see buff?
feel as well, the timing has changed. So if you know the B-hop timing on old CS2, the new version, the timings are slightly different, just because your jumps are more consistently at a height than they were before. You know, usually you'd have like sort of diminishing jump height for each consecutive B-hop because you're losing stamina. Now that's changed, but it does seem like I'm seeing a lot more kills happen, and even myself, where people are still moving, like pretty actively still moving, or haven't come to that, perfect counter strafe. There's a bit more. I don't know if they've necessarily changed that, but I mean, maybe this is placebo or just confirmation bias, but I am seeing a lot more running full head, like basically not come to a stop full headshot at long ranges where, I understand the bullet's got to go somewhere, but the frequency is a bit too high, even especially on pistols. I'm noticing it on pistols a lot where people are full spamming USPs and not stopping at all, and the bullets are just like a laser beam. So I don't know what's gone on there, but the MP7's pretty good. that much I can say for sure.
Yeah, maybe my one of the guys I've been queuing with since we were only 17. I mean, it's late to CS, but for us, we're still friends. It's over a decade of queuing together and losing. He used to call the MP7 the best rifle, like back in Go. So hopefully he'll be back to it. So I got him a Stat Track skin for his birthday on his 18th, all those years ago. Maybe that'll make a reappearance.
All the forward planning for this one moment.
Yeah.
I mean, when we were shitters, like we started as pure Silver 1 shitters who had to grind up. The MP7 saw a lot of play. Like that was a gun back then. That was the good old days in my eyes. But no, Skriv, you've opened up with a Parivision pick, one that's probably very in vogue. I've got the second pick. I just realized I hadn't been thinking very much. In my head, YouM3, it was your pick next, but no, it is me. Oof. I feel like there are some valuable underdogs. I also feel like some of them are going to be like the ones I like and probably be available when I come back round to it. So I'm going to look at the favorites section. And there are a few favorites I think are a little bit underrated right now. There's a good chance that, people don't estimate them fully. And one of them, there's not really, I was about to say one of them's got a good matchup. Then I was like, no, I don't think they actually do. There's a weird breakdown. If anyone's looking at the matchups right now, I feel like we've got a very stacked upper portion of games, and the lower portions, I don't know who to trust. So whoever I pick is going to be somewhat in the battle, in the war, in the trenches. Okay, I'm going underdog. Screw it. I don't trust these games. I cannot trust these games. Give me FUT.
Damn it.
Yeah, I know they're the belle of the ball right now. And honestly, the way they played in the online, obviously, portion of Last Bounty has inspired a lot of that. Now, it could all come crashing down when they show up here and play on LAN. But in the online portion of Bounty, yeah, they beat OG, and they are, I'm talking inches from beating that Furia team. If not for the one-man machine, the god that turned it all on its head, Molodoy, who, by the way, won that game for them, then went and beat Heroic for them, just to then finally run out of gas, shit the bed in the next series, and it all have been for naught, because no one else could really step up and fill that void. I mean, it's been a very sluggish start for Furia, but that FUT side, they just looked so good, and it's very different to the FUT side of old, or the Na'Vi junior team that we used to see. They had a very specific set of go-tos, and most of it was, Makaze, can you smash them in the mouth somewhere? Upon completion of smashing, Krabany and Demon, can we just casually just walk out, take a contact duel, and see what happens? Like, there was some very straight-up sort of fights they would like to take in very specific ways, and it used to work just because of the talent of the players. Makaze, a fantastic entry, one of those amazing players at high velocity, and then Krabany with Demon playing off his shoulder. I don't know if you guys have watched a lot of Demon demos, but if he is peeking someone and they are where he thinks they are dead. There just isn't another option. He will rip that head off. And now they've kind of evolved. Since the Makaze exit, or promotion, I should say, the eventual settling on Pound and Lao X, they've just been playing better and better. And more complex CS as well, I feel like. I see more variety in the way they play. I see more effective strats used quite a lot of the time. And a good part of what allows them to put a bow on top of that sort of that present, cherry on top of that cake of the way they play CS has been Jugs. Jugs in the clutch, Jugs in the late round, just Jugs trading, Jugs doing anything has just looked so good, so clean these days. And I'm super excited to watch them do it again because sure, Demon's still got that great first bullet. Craveny calls a good game. He's a good fragging IGL. Launex, been a decently serviceable entry. But when Jugs is alive and it's a 2vx, 1vx, there's a little part of my brain's like, I believe in him. I believe in him. And he's been clutch forever, but it's just been scaling upwards and upwards. As they've become more complete as a side, he's found more places to find kills, but also he's kept that very late round, which for a 17-year-old is crazy, sort of clutching ability. I have to pick them here. They not only are one of the most lethal looking underdogs just on paper right now, they also have one of the weaker sort of brackets. They've got a 3D Max matchup, which 3D Max have shown us the floor truly doesn't exist. Like we've joked about it, right now it does not exist. And then if they win that game, it's legacy BC game. I cannot trust either one of those teams right now. I wish I could. I wish I could trust both explicitly, just yes, you guys are 100% my guys, but I can't at all. So FUT, it's looking good. And even if they go to the lower bracket, I trust them to beat a lot of these other more questionable sides. So yeah, as an underdog pick, I think they're immensely valuable. I love the look of them. Skriv, have you watched a lot of FUT? You're a FUT guy?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a bit of a FUT guy. Yeah, I definitely feel like this team, just to kind of reiterate what you're saying, really on the up, super young team, a lot of potential. And I think that they, I guess, have got, bits and pieces in place from like previously, at Na'Vi Junior and stuff like this. Like they do seem to have structure and a game plan and just sort of that longer vision, whether that's within a game or within the sort of project as a whole. I also, to be fair, like Coolio in behind them as well. Not necessarily a super inexperienced guy. I
completely forgot who it was coaching them. That's why I didn't say it. I just blanked.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he brings a lot of like experience from the online realm. I think it's sort of safe to say the odd time translating that to LAN, but not really. So this will be kind of an interesting test to see where this FUT team is at the moment. The only thing that I worry, and it's something that I kind of lean on in my punditry, is just sort of they're a very, very young team. I think that they do need to be careful not to get themselves caught up a bit. They could have done slightly better at the bounty for sure, if only this, that, and the other, right? They had a bit of a rough run in the Rio qualifier, which I feel like that's very shortly after the fact. They potentially should be qualifying for Rio, to be honest, with the rest of the teams that are in the field there. So I quietly worry that maybe the mental side gets to them a little coming into something like Krakow. And again, very quick turnaround, it feels like, from Blast for them. So they're a team for me to like keep a keen eye on. However, I do unfortunately feel there might be with, a few teams out there, like a Na'Vi, for example, like maybe a FaZe, they might come in and pluck some of these pieces quite quickly from this team. So I think at the moment, and with the pick and the nature of the game that we're playing, it is very, very solid. But looking a little bit further down the line, I think that FUT as a project has to maybe start performing in the next 6 months or so, maybe even a bit sooner than that. Otherwise, I do see little cracks, little issues kind of appearing, and maybe a breakdown of this team. And already the FUT organization, not been around very long, they have shown a pretty kind of cutthroat style of just completely switching teams and everything like that. So they might also want to move quick if things don't start really, really improving. And again, into this season, it just feels like there is such a gap to be exploited. So hopefully for FUT, they do perform well here. And yeah, potentially make it through. I'm also, not to harp on them too much, kind of down on 3D Max. I think they're going to be one of those teams this year that will be in the mud, unfortunately, and probably grace. Figured out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, they say that something about the devil, but they may end up in hell themselves. Now, listen, I think people talk about FUT very much in this like holistic sense. We want to talk about them as a team because they were Na'Vi Junior, then made the switch over. They had to plug the hole that was Makaze. But I share your same fears, and I guess the the issues that are probably going to be down the line here for FUT, because listen, you could be a FUT guy, but it's all about the double Ds on this team. Like Demon and Jugas being the opener and closer to the round. if you can put this sandwich somewhere else, they will thrive just as well, because the mechanics and the decision making just look so strong. And I think when we first talked about Navi Jr. or FUT on this podcast before with UT, I remember actually saying to you that like Jugs wasn't the guy that actually took my attention at first, like jumping out on the stats page. He wasn't someone I was necessarily looking for. But every time I watched the following game, I was like, this guy's getting better. He's like better than the last time I saw him. Like the choices he's making, the kills he's finding. And it's like, it's just continuing to scale at the moment where, yeah, he is finding a lot more of those clutches. And, you know, for people that are more fans of like S tier, high profile names, people like, you know, a JKS or Rops, you know, this is probably the next guy. Like if that's your sort of, if that's the way your bread is buttered, Jugs is kind of that same kind of category of player. He just doesn't play nearly as ratty as some of these other like late round players. He is a little bit more forward facing. Yeah, but I'm sure that could be trained out of him if he decides he's just going to be the clutch guy every single time. So no, I mean, FUT are actually at an exciting inflection point, and to be honest, I'd like to see them stay with this, just because I like seeing projects succeed and build up. You know, I want to be able to have that conversation 2 or 3 years from now where we say like Crabini actually is a good in-game leader at building teams, or you know, finding a structure, identifying talent, or Coolio is a good, you know, tactical coach or whatever. And you usually only get those types of narratives when those teams stay together and build that legacy for themselves. So there is a fear that they could have a minor fall from grace if the pressure and the stages don't succeed with them. But I don't think we're going to end up in a situation like the old Russian team Aurora, where they're traveling to all these events and then they have this, you know, players retiring and the whole team divided. I don't think FUT give me that vibe at all. They'll take that experience and they'll climb back up all the same. So it may just hamper their ability to be at these tier 1 events, but I imagine not for long, provided they keep the pieces. Yeah,
provided no one comes in and plucks. Because I do, like, as soon as you said that, like, a phase comes looking, I'm like, okay. Immediately in my head, I started just plotting through it. So I'm like, who's getting taken? Who's going where? Like, what's the comparison? Like, phase, it only falls down, because as much as phase probably need that sort of change at some point, like a refreshing of the old guard, I'm just like, there's no way the priority pieces you'd want are the ones you're replacing on phase, right? Like the guys on FUT that we're talking about, the Jugs, the Demon, the double Ds, as YouM3's put it. Those two are probably not. They're basically not available for a phase. Like, you don't replace Twists and Frozen with these two guys. But I understand the fear. Like, that is 100% legitimate. When you look at the profiling stats as well, like, I love to look through these like profiling graphs and things on Skybox Edge. Yeah, Rops and Jugs share so many roles. They're sort of like T-side, as I call it, like shape is the same. Like in terms of all the different stats map out. They're low opening attempt, pure lurkers who get a good amount of trades and flash assists for their roles, but then also are just ratty little so-and-sos, late round, alive, clutching.
So you're saying you like the shape of the double Ds?
Yeah, the double Ds just shape up really nicely. They really do.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
We're all on the same page in that sense. So yeah, I do fear for that. But if they are able to you know, make a main event here, let's say this is Krakow. This is supposed to be Katowice. We know it's not yet. Like, we haven't given it that credit yet. But if this is supposed to be our Kato, and they make the main event, and then even there, they don't go out in last place. Like, they just get a one win. Like, somewhere. They get one win against another maybe play-in team. That's huge. That's huge for your season. Like, that's a real prestige event where you've gotten legitimate wins, a legitimate placement. Yeah, FUT probably as an org keep you together. They don't start shopping you, is more importantly. Because sure, people might come knocking and start asking, how many zeros is there on that buyout? But you probably don't knock a few like numbers off if you're FUT, if they're winning games like these. So yeah, big event for them coming up right now.
I mean, you think about teams that have been built recently. You know, some of the pieces that were afloat. You know, if I'm 100 Thieves, I would have probably inquired about a couple of the players. I just imagine FUT probably wouldn't want to depart, or the players wouldn't want to the departure from that when they have the prospect of potentially making the major if they place well enough at some of these events. You know, they're at that key point where they could be the next Parivision for this upcoming major. They could squeak through the VRS just so that they get to that major, and then they have that really grand stage to then display everything. Because listen, we could talk circles around tier 2 players, some of the tier 1 I guess debuts that these guys get, but often people will always remember the majors. If you think about Zhui and his rise with Namiga, people are like, oh wow, that guy was incredible on Namiga, you should join a better team. It's like, well, he joined Spirit, and that maybe wasn't a good fit. But you think about Parivision even at Budapest. It was like, what? They replaced AW, but he was insane at the major. He was not good up until that point, actually.
Yeah, that was a funny conversation to have. It's like, did you check the numbers, lads? Like, you all got super excited. And people, he was a 0.85.
People don't do that. That's the thing. It's like they don't understand who these players are going into the tournament, and so their first impression is like, wow, if this guy's having a live tournament, he might be the GOAT because I have no other impression of him. Funnily enough, I still hold the theory that, how good AW did at that event actually may have secured his exit out of the roster, because it's like, wow, if we just have like a star player that's actually like more suited to these roles in that position, we could be sick, actually. And then sure enough,
here they are.
Win an event. Yeah.
All right, Yumi, it's your pick. You got back-to-back picks, but who are you going to go with first?
Yeah, you kind of stole who I was going to go with for my first pick.
I thought I might have. And as I looked through the list, I was like, I could take a cheeky foot here. And then I was like, yeah, Yumi would like that.
I have a soft spot for some players, and I feel like that does get exploited on this show sometimes. I'm going to lean in on an old favorite that have kind of been in a weird spot, but I like the roster moves that they've been making. I'm going with a favorite first, and I'm starting with Pain. They didn't necessarily impress too much in their opening games with Period Junior and VSM, but I do think that they've made some very strong acquisitions. Often when we look at Brazilian teams and we think, oh wow, there's so much firepower across all these Brazilian lineups, but they're never going to be congregated on one team. I think Biguzera has actually kind of accomplished that with the Period Junior and VSM moves. And as much as there will be some synergistic issues, they were starting to explore the idea of Snow being more aggressive and being a bit more of an opener, space taker, kind of a propped up star player in that regard, trying to make them a sort of mini donk type, which he's not going to fulfill in that same capacity. They have now brought in pieces that are a little bit more naturally aggressive, and so Snow can be a bit more of the third in, a bit more of the cooler head, because as much as he's good in chaotic situations, he has actually developed a lot in sort of like mid-round understanding of how the rounds are developing or what fight to expect next. And it's probably the only piece that Biguzera himself can really look back at and be like, I know we've run through so many scrims where you have the right read, and I trust your judgment now. Because they tried to bring in experienced pieces with DGT, Davideus. Those guys don't have like leadership qualities. They didn't seem to step up in the bigger games like maybe Biguzera and Pain had hoped, because often the rookies would shy away. Like VSM actually does and has delivered in some of those big games when they had like the opening debuts with Oplano before, when he was, I think, still VAC banned and not allowed to play at like major circuit events.
Yeah, he was still on the major ban basically. So he was playing Flashpoint. That's pretty much it. And that was an iconic Flashpoint run, but yes, it was pretty much all he could play.
But VSM, he might have been the GOAT at that event, Widest teeth you'll ever find at a Counter-Strike tournament.
He was legendary.
And also the cleanest headshots as well. So I maybe have a soft spot for VSM in that regard. But him coupled with Period Junior, I just think there's no way they can't break through rounds, even if the calling's a little out of whack or the rounds get a little bit hairy. They're gonna pull the wool over the eyes of some of the teams at this event, because some of these other teams just simply are in similar spots but don't have nearly the same sort of raw muscle that I think Pain are bringing to the table.
I was just going to say, I think it's always kind of interesting, like when these Brazilian teams sort of get together. They're on paper a lot of the time they can be exciting. Like I was kind of excited about the MIBR Lukauzi move ultimately. Maybe not so much what they're doing at the moment. Kind of interesting, whatever. But like sometimes you can get excited about the Brazilian moves, and if there isn't that sort of initial success or the energy's not quite right on the server, I think some of the Brazilian players become almost like different people when they're playing the game. Maybe they're, cooler outside the server, that sort of thing. It can be a bit messy once you actually get going. And like I say, if that initial success is not there, I think that's something that Big Zero does quite well, is acclimating players into a team. So I'm quietly hopeful for them to do something, but the finding of that Brazilian team is quite important at the moment. There seems to be the pieces out there. If they can get together in the right way, they maybe can have this like Brazilian super team again, maybe. But it just feels like the door is starting to sort of close on that. So I kind of look at this a little bit as a dangerous sort of last hurrah for players like Big Uzera maybe, and potentially for Pain as an org to look more internationally like some of their, rivals are within the Brazilian scene at the moment. So I like the moves. I like the way that they look, but I just always like hold my breath with how these things are going. Sometimes they force players into like the wrong roles. Sometimes it's that honeymoon period and then there's a bit of a downturn. And I think some of the Brazilian players just like as entities are not afraid to kind of coast with the domestic strength and then playing a few international tournaments. Sure. And if it doesn't quite work out, that's fine. We'll get invited to the next one. They find it difficult sometimes to really find that drive. Just look at the Furia players, for example, and where they've been last year, 12 months ago versus where they are now. It really is just kind of night and day. So I'm a little, holding off before I really get sold on this.
That was actually what I was going to bring up is the Furia players, but I actually will praise Pain for maybe even chopping the wrong pieces too soon, actually. But they do seem like they are actively trying to find solutions like season to season, whether that's through some of these roster moves, some of the game planning seems to change sometimes. So they don't seem like they're coasting, and if they find people are coasting, I don't think they're shy of giving them the axe.
What I like about this move, I don't know, like we've talked about this a bit in terms of they've picked up the hot commodities of the Brazilian scene, something that's rarely achievable. Thankfully, those two guys were both playing on relatively either like fake teams, like just dudes with a name, or orgs with very little pull and very little contract strength. Because typically there's a stupid figure attached to a player, you can't really do much about it, yada yada yada, nothing happens. But I did love the fact that they went for these moves, and I've seen them now play a little bit with Pyria and with VSM. And we talked about sort of the role clash before, Yumi. We talked about how these guys were both kind of doing the same thing in Brazil. Like they were stars, taking up all the star slots, like as far as openings and being set up and just going for everything. And they were just dumpstering teams because, there's a lot of weak teams in Brazil. There's a lot of LANs and a lot of events that supports this great like wealth of rosters. It's just most of them are not very good. And so at the end of the day, they just get battered by the VSMs, by the Pyria Juniors. But we watched them a bit now, and VSM, he's played 4 maps as basically like a hard entry for the team, it seems, and has had almost no success with his entries. Despite that, they won a series, played another one where they didn't look terrible. Pyria, fantastic debut, fantastic opening to his stint now, and Snow found a couple of strong maps, which, 3 out of 4 maps being not red for Snow, success. That's a turnaround for the bookies. So sure. I actually I'm really excited for this Pain side. Like I like them as a favorite here. They're also in a relatively weak side of this sort of bracket. I think their opening game's Astralis. Yeah, it is. Then they've got the winner of NRG Bait. Like I'm sorry, there's no bigger layup right now in the scene. I know Bait are interesting and threatening, but they are playing with some random kid I've never watched play.
Who the fuck is that guy, man?
Who is this academy kid? Segukawa. Like, I've never heard of a lad. So they've got a great opportunity to go straight through. In that sense, game theory-wise, and in terms of the CS being played, they are a pretty solid pick, I must admit. I'm just, I'm curious to see how it develops. Skriv, there is an element of truth to what you said in terms of your doubts. terms of the potential just honeymoon phase, and how do the roles look long term? Will they, enter that sort of coasting mode? We hope not. We hope this is another Brazilian team that's legitimate, sticks around for a good while, actually ends up being competitive. A Pain roster that plays the way Pain get discussed, basically. Actually top 10 capable, will play some good CS, will give you a good series, will be a dark horse even to go deep. Fingers crossed that is the Pain we see. I don't know. We've said that before. We've ended up very much disappointed. We'll find out. Yumi, another pick? You going to take another favorite?
I'll go underdogs. And,
okay.
I feel like the start of the season was, we didn't undergo the most amount of roster moves in the world, but I feel like I just have to put my faith in the vision of some of these projects. And I'm just going to go with NIP, because I can't have foot. I'll go with NIP. Because the acquisition of Cairn is a curious one. At the Bounty, they do seem to have tried to slot him in fairly 1-for-1 on some of the CT roles, and even the T-side roles of U-Jerks before him. And it doesn't seem like that transition has necessarily gone too great. Like Cairn, I don't know if you have a different characterization of Cairn than I do, but I've always saw him as more of a opportunist, sort of aggressive type player that doesn't always take like a first timing, but will, if his teammates have done something, he will spring into the fray very quickly. He feels like more reactive and less sort of set piecey, like NIP seem to want their components to be at times. And I saw him make a lot of mistakes with NIP at that first Bounty. I do think that I do put enough faith in Snappy to have looked at that. Him and Exist, I'm sure, will have looked at that and thought, how do we structure it around the player that we bring in to try and give us more firepower? Because he simply didn't give that firepower in their debut event. So that's really, I mean, those are my opening concerns. They do look a little shaky in their debut, where other teams have thrived. Parivision, I guess, is the big example. But it does seem like they haven't really understood Karen's psyche, or like the way that he feels the most comfortable to express his game, which has to be one of the tools that they utilize, because surely Exkapersky, Wrinkle, those are the guys that you want to be serving as the two parts of a 3-man core. Shush is supposed to be the anchor spot as well, but I think because of the transition, even he looked a little uncomfortable. Like I think Shush always takes a little bit of time to warm up into rosters. So I'm expecting improvements from both Karen and Shush alike. I think this NIP, tactically will be better than most of the teams at this event, in fact. So, it'll be Parivision, it'll be NIP, maybe a little bit of Gamer Legion, maybe. I haven't seen the worst things in the world, but Snacks does call a looser game.
Yeah. So your characterization quickly, I just want to jump in on that. The thing is, the way Ken ended up playing, but also being recorded, like just in terms of how the numbers come out of it at the back end, like in terms of the amount of openings he's taking, and also when I watched the game against Liquid, like how the game just ended up playing out in terms of him leading the way a little more than I'm expecting, doesn't really match my characterization of Ken. I'm sort of on the same page as you. Doesn't really match Snappy's characterization of Ken, like that I have pretty much word for word on tape coming soon for members. So I'm just a bit like, it's just a one-off bad series. I don't think it's something that we should expect to repeat. Like, I think there is some discomfort. It's a new. He's playing roles that I think Snappy envisions having a little bit of say, a little bit of input in certain places. To tell you the truth, I don't think the debut just went the way they hoped, and I expect the rest of the season really to go differently. Like, I'm a big fan of this NIP. I've said this before. I wasn't a big fan of U-Jerks and Arrows Dush. The moves, that then followed have made them better and better, and I think this is the best version of the team we've seen in a while. I expect them to kick on, basically, from last season where we saw them play great CS, not quite have the results. I expect the results to come through. So, no, Ken, in that sense, hasn't so far performed the way I expected him to in a variety of different ways, like profile-wise and actual output-wise. I expect that to be corrected. I expect this event also, starting with a rematch with Liquid, to look very different. I doubt they lose that game again.
Yeah, essentially, my I guess where I land on it is I think the skill set of Karen kind of works for the roles that he's now playing, but he just needs to grow into it. And I think that one event may be enough for him to have grown into a bit more.
Sure. Skriv, where do you stand on this? What was your feeling on NIP last year? Firstly, you know, they did the big remontada, you know, from 200 plus VRS to into the major. Like these roster moves that have followed as well, or this roster move specifically. Like, how do you feel about this NIP?
Yeah, I think that they still lack a bit of punch. Definitely, kind of the almost VRS Moneyball type thing last year. That's sort of to be respected, and it is certainly a grind. So I can look at a few of the players that were on that team and within the team and whatever, that they respect where they're at in their career, respect what they have to do. That it's like, you know, they really did just kind of zip up and get on with it. Not too much complaining, and it's obviously paid off. You know, I think you do have to maybe swallow a bit of pride to do that. So I'll give them their flowers for that kind of thing last year and the build up, as it were. But yeah, I think that they still, like I say, lack a little bit of that individual strength even coming in. There is a bit of this NIP trying to just keep the costs down, I think, and Snappy in the past at least has kind of been the ultimate guy to do that, really, and you know, bring in talent, nurture talent. I think that you could see it as hopefulness. I think, you know, I've interviewed Snappy a couple of times as well. It's maybe a bit more like cynicism, that he's like, okay, this guy's good at the game. I'm good at bringing the best out of players or making them fit within my ideas and my systems. And I think that that's certainly what he's trying to do with Ken ultimately. That it's like, right, this is a guy that I like the look of, should be able to fit in. Seems like he's got, you know, good vibes. Maybe he's got like a wrinkle vouch or something. And they bring him in with their vision, rather than, as you see with some teams, which can be the philosophy of like, okay, we're picking up this guy and yeah, he gets to do about 80% of what he wants to do, and the rest of us will mold around him, right? That's the sort of superstar pickups that can happen. But I don't think that NIP is a team like that. So I like the pickup. I like that, again, with these projects, similar to some of the other teams that are at this stage and that we've talked about, they're unafraid to make moves and to be a little more cutthroat, and, you know, to kind of get rid of certain pieces that they maybe brought together. The Rozdosh and U-Jerks move being the example of that. And I think that U-Jerks, good player, and really was for a moment very exciting, but that's like 2 or 3 years ago now, and I don't think that he's necessarily lived up to that hype. Again, they are still looking for this just maybe 0.1, 0.15 higher statistical anomaly, as it were, and they just haven't been able to create that just yet. I'm not sure whether Ken would necessarily be that, though, for me. So I think I'll certainly, again, have to kind of wait, but from a core tactical standpoint, I'm definitely up there with you guys, that these guys should be able to just, in theory of the game and of what I'm saying, be able to beat the rest of the field. But I just don't know, in this kind of marketplace of fraggers and faster game and run and gun and, you know, a little bit more mid-rounding in there and whatnot, I think that they will still struggle a little bit to just really live up to the expectations that we're sort of setting here.
Also, you know, just to clarify for people at home, you know, Anubis underwent a change coming away from the bounty, and going into Krakow. That change will be utilized in the games that we're going to be playing. So there's not only the fact that Anubis is coming back into the map pool, but then there's also the fact that the map is the dynamic for middle and canals has changed quite substantially just by the movement of this hole or the window.
Yeah. It feels like basically they've gone, this map was T-sided. T-side, bad. Move hole, make CT-sided. Like, I swear Valve sometimes just make the dumbest change. That, like, the point of the map was great, that it was a T-sided map. Like, I liked that idea. This change just felt like, we didn't want that to be the case. How do we fix that? Move the hole.
I do think it has helped. It has helped this. The couple of changes that they have done have helped CT side, because there's like better things you can do on your bomb sites. You know, as a camera rotating player, the box it provides cover coming out of camera now into the A site, because the box was moved as well for people that aren't looking at the patch notes all the time. And then you've added a little hole above connector towards Glyph or Plat on the back of the B bomb side as well that can serve both ways. You know, T's can Molotov Glyph, and people from Glyph can actually throw smokes or Molotovs at the T's without overexposing themselves to that fight in the first place. So they've given them a couple of edges, but I think like in the games that I've played so far, and you know, obviously people aren't throwing the right nade sets and not necessarily reading up on everything. But the map has still been fairly T-sided from my play of things anyway, just because unless you're being aggressive as a CT by dropping through the hole, you're still lacking quite a lot of information on the site hits, and those can be quite explosive and quite devastating, actually.
Yeah, like that was the takeaway. I was discussing this with, funnily enough, again, to bring this guy up, one of the guys I queue with. We just love spamming execs towards the B bomb sites, because at the level we play, we're garbage. Now, having 2 coordinated smokes and a good flashbang, fuck it, you're sorted. Y'all are fucking set. You're winning that round if people actually get out of main, which they never do. But when I look at this change, firstly, I was tangent entirely here, pissed off that we brought back Anubis just to play the old version of Anubis for one event.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck was the point of that? I did not like that. It's like, oh, Valve are bringing back the map pool change. Okay, wait for them to change the map pool. Why did we go ahead and just put the old Anubis in for some events? Like, I did not like that. Did not appreciate that. I thought that was an incredibly dumb move. But also, yeah, this is a map that should come back and favor certain teams, and I think this NIP seemed quite excited to play it. We'll see how they've actually adjusted to it. If it is as much a feather in their cap as they hope it is. But I do want to, before I move on, push back on one thing. I actually disagree that they need more punch. They have, I think in this field, if not the best entry, maybe third. I guess Centaurus is here. So yeah, not the best entry overall, but like in terms of raw, explosive, hard, first guy in type fraggers, Casper's guy's actually shown himself to just be elite. Like he's not kind of good. He's not potentially good. I think he is just elite at this point. And I would have given him that credit end of year last year, pretty much, if he'd played enough sort of a sample to be on that ballot for opener of the year. I'd have had him up there. Sorry, Flamesy, get the fuck out of here. Like, I'm just not interested. But also, yeah, Cairn is by far a more explosive player from my eye test than a Ujerks. Shush is a high value sort of anchor who's played beyond his roles. Wrinkle, there was always the question mark just because of streakiness, but raw firepower, he's got it. Like he can shoot. It's just the decision making. So I don't like the idea that they don't have enough punch. For me, they have punch. It's just about their game plan overall can sometimes lead them down a blind alley. Like they can get a little too heavy on the execs, a little too heavy on the pace. Like the fullbacks sometimes haven't been there. And that's what let them down. Then obviously at the major, what let them down was just clutch. Like a clutch gene just disappeared. Like they just choked away lead after lead, despite everything else looking so magnificent. They just let their leads slip. So NIP's problems have been harder to grasp for me in terms of literally, like, how do I say this is how you fix choking? Like, there's no such thing, right? Like, they just choked the major. They were the better team in those 2 series. They lost to FaZe and to Parivision. They just let the leads go late. So, yeah, just a little pushback because they are one of my pet teams. I do have that instinct to give them a little fight for them.
Sure.
But I don't disagree. You know, I'd say they probably do have punch. They lack a little technique. You know, there's their footwork maybe isn't great to get the most out of that punch.
Are you calling them Deontay Wilder? How dare you?
Yeah, just to draw an analogy, so to speak. So.
But yeah, anyway. Oh, it's back to me. Nice. Wow. Okay. I could just pick an underdog again, because I've been a fan of Heroic. I've liked Legacy at times. BC Game are the talk of the event, probably, to be honest. Like, most people are going to be watching BC Games matches. S1mple has that effect.
And then they're just going to go, oh, Muterus, you guys suck, but...
It's Muterus' fault. He didn't call right. It's like, I don't even have time to get mad at those people. I know I will, but I don't have time to get pre-mad. I think I'm going to go with a favorite, though. I am going to try and pick one of those teams in the tough upper section of this sort of draw. I am just going to go with G2. I have to just reluctantly like shrug my shoulders and just say, look, Do I think Heavy God has been so heavily praised that he's become like borderline overrated? Yes, actually. Yes, I do think he has moments slightly overrated, but he's still very good. And I think the part that people mostly get wrong isn't necessarily how they talk about his abilities and his skills. It's just the characterization they have of him as like a pure bitch support. Fucking just not true. Not true. Just because he anks on CT side doesn't mean he's a support, guys. Like, there's more to the game than just your CT spots.
Sorry, can I quickly interrupt? You know, at the start of this podcast, when we did the upper, I guess, we did the favorites versus underdogs distribution. It was in a certain place. You know, I put a screenshot in our group chat so that we can see.
Oh,
I refreshed
it changed.
Parivision is currently top seeded. They are currently top seeded, and so they went from underdog at the start of this
what
podcast.
do we do now?
So now they're a clear favorite for
the Monday cutoff.
So
I
just
forgot that's how
that
HLTV ranking was updated. It's on Mondays, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh crap!
I guess at like 7 or something like that.
So are we invalidating this underdog pick, or are we putting it as a favorite now?
Oh, I see.
I'll
what
allow
you're
it.
trying to do.
I'll allow it. If it's just that one change from what I can tell that's actually changed. Like they've gone up into favorites and
I mean, I don't mind. I've not had another pick yet. So if you want to just move them into favorite for me, I'm fine with that. You know, I'm more here to talk about the teams and the picks and whatnot.
I don't think it will change too much, so I'll just do it. I'll just do it. Yeah. I'll move Astralis. Astralis are now the #1 seeded underdog.
You have my permission.
You have a favorite pick of Parivision. Sorry to limit it for you, but yes, okay. We'll adjust that. So, thank you, HLTV, for updating mid-show. Great timing. During their confirmed, where they're not actually doing any sort of fun format, they'll just fuck with us. Okay, thank you, HLTV. Yeah. I know we're at the forefront of your minds at all times. But yes, anyway, back to my picks. As I was ranting on about Heavy God, yeah, he's not quite a hard support in this way people characterize him for, but he's still fantastic as a player, and I still think he deserves that sort of credit in that way. As a team, they've looked a bit iffy towards the end of last year. You know, we had the London run, and I thought the London run was replicable. I thought elements of it that we could see again, like quite simply, Matisse being highly effective, YouM3 not being that big of a deciding factor in terms of their win-loss. Like, 'cause he wasn't that great in London. He had a lot of weak performances, but they outperformed it. They had the mid-rounds out of Hunter, mostly on Inferno. They were able to account for his like banana weaknesses. They had really a lot of other players stepping up in big games. Matisse being the primary one, Heavy God having a lot of help, being a primary helper really in that. And Hunter playing pretty well himself individually. Like, not necessarily always calling the best game. That got a bit, I think, overdone. The idea that Hunter was now a great IGL, but he actually played a good game, and you know, all of that combined allowed them to really to thrive. But they have struggled to replicate it, and the fact that YouM3 has had probably his worst season since stepping up into Tier 1 has just cost them. Like, it's sunk them in a lot of games, a lot of series. He's taking like this huge number of entries and openings, but just not finding enough success to justify it. That's become a very real problem. Like, and it wasn't really in London. So what to really take from all this? They've had a big off season. You know, they've had some time to think it over. They haven't made any moves. I know they thought about it. I know they were part of the group of teams inquiring for PR and, you know, at least considering that sort of move. But in the end, haven't made any changes. I'm going to give Saw a lot of credit when I make this pick. I'm going to give Saw and Hunter to a lesser extent, but mostly Saw a lot of credit when I make this pick, and I say they will have understood, figured out some of at least their problems. Not all of them necessarily. I'm not going to pretend they're magic, but they'll have found some of the issues, found some of the problems, things that are making, for example, YouM3 uncomfortable, making him, honestly, take this number of fights. Like, is it choices he's making? Is it the way we're setting him up that's the problem? There have been some places you can point in terms of blame for this team and the difficulties they've been having. Address some of it and come back, because the pieces are fantastic. I'm not one of those people who doesn't believe Matisse is a Tier 1 like star fragger. I do think he's got that ability. I think Heavy God's pretty legit. Mav's great aim. I'm not a big Sun-Bias guy, but that's not the defining factor for this team and the way they play. So Saw, I'm giving you this credit. You should have addressed some of these problems in this team. That means that the talent can shine just enough to get you through this sort of stage. I'm not too worried about it. As long as you've had that off-season reflection, that time, you'll be okay. So yeah, I don't know about you guys. I know G2 for me was supposed to be like a great new addition to the top 6, like, you know, competitive, have the talent to challenge the Spirits and potentially the Valkyns and maybe even the Furias and Vitalities of the world. Instead, their season kind of just whimpered and fell and didn't lead to much. What's the takeaway? Do we believe in a G2 turnaround coming into 2026?
I don't know, man. It's very tough with this team. It feels like they don't play, you know, every single event. Towards the end of last season, they had a fair amount of time in between events to kind of do what maybe you're talking about, and even some like success to work off of and replicate. Does that mean there's more eyeballs on them? I mean, maybe. That certainly could be something, but I think that it's the same sort of issue for G2 as it's maybe been for like as long as I can remember, and it does come down to a bit of leadership and lack of direction and trying to just min-max the IGL role as much as they can for whatever reason. I don't know why they don't, you know, try and make a more daring move in that sense. The pieces are good. I think they'll be fine for this stage. I'll give that as the caveat. I think they will be fine for this stage just because of the rest of the field. But they just kind of sit as maybe the best of the rest. Maybe they're there and, you know, they'll place and they'll get an invite to the follow-up or the next event or whatever it may be. But they still do lack a lot of just completeness, I think, is missing from this team. They should have enough in there. Is it the fact that they're like almost G2 is like an org and the history of who's been there and all this? I think there's a lot of kind of like yes manning going on. And I think that can maybe become a bit of a problem, and they don't necessarily speak up when there are like issues with following Hunter, or there are issues with forcing players to do certain awkward things, because in the past they've kind of wanted to, you know, work with Nico and work with Hunter as well, you know, great players in their own right, obviously, but also just kind of great guys and mentors and legends and, you know, all this kind of thing. And I think that they just miss the point sometimes. They just miss the problem. Or maybe they don't, and it just doesn't quite get talked about enough. So hopefully that's something that maybe, Saw's come in and done. But again, I think he's more of a tactical voice than a leader of men. So a lot of it comes down to like Hunter and being able to realize, and I just feel like, unfortunately, there's maybe not as much of that when you see them on the server. They have these kind of ideas, then they sort of bail on those ideas, but they're all still kind of having fun regardless, but they're not quite winning. You know, it's a very strange organ and team to play in at times, I think, because of that.
I do think G2 understand the value, at least, though, of having like a franchise player. I think, you know, retaining someone that has a legacy or history with your organization is good for, you know, the team's identity. Because like, say you replace Hunter and you put in, I don't know, like Shue or Krizen or someone that's actually like, you know, trying to build themselves as a career in-game leader, you know, suddenly G2 goes from, oh wow, this historic organization that's been at all these top events and is trying to build in the new generation of players, to kind of OG plus. You know, like some Pius doesn't necessarily have that fandom or pull. Malbs maybe does a bit for the NA region, and some people are, you know, very high on him, obviously. Heavy God actually made a lot of his legacy on OG. Mattis with Fnatic. You know, you essentially just become like a semi-promotional team, like the first team that's going to take the risk on the academy players, essentially. So I do like that G2 are sticking to that, at least from like a brand identity point of view. But I think also Hunter probably will recognize that, you know, he was never as good as Nico. You know, he couldn't command the space on the server the same way that that Nico could. And so eventually he's going to have to transition into an in-game leader or into like a really dedicated role player, as opposed to maybe being this sort of pseudo-aggressive piece. So I'm willing to give it time, and I think Saw is probably a good piece to have alongside that, because I imagine under Saw's tactician sort of tutelage, this roster should develop properly, and I think Hunter actually will end up being a very solid in-game leader for the future. Just it's in the awkward growing your hair out phase where it doesn't quite look that good. You know, it's in that middling portion. Like, do you tie it up? How do you style it? I think he's in that that transition where he doesn't really know how long his hair is going to be necessarily. But I mean, I like Malbs. I like Heavy God. I like Mattis. Some
They're a
pies I
very
can take.
likable team.
Yeah, some pies I
Yeah.
can take or leave. I'll
really.
be frank, but he's a good personality.
Yeah,
At his height,
always
he
have
looks
been.
great.
They always have had that
Yeah.
sort of element of branding to them, where it's like
Yeah.
all these players I want to root for. Like MD, to be fair, like it predates G2 for me, but yeah, like Matisse again. Shit, they just keep signing players I like from places elsewhere. Really,
How dare you?
I mean, Nico and Monacy were. I guess Monacy was like kind of on the academy. It was a thing, but man, yeah, we want them to win. Like even if it doesn't make sense, like it's not that we think they're necessarily the best team in the world. We just kind of want them to win at this point.
Yeah, and I still maintain that the London event that they debuted the roster and everyone's like, oh, we don't know how they're going to play. Well, every other team also had no idea how they were going to play, and there was, I think, a lot of catching teams off guard by the tempo that they were using, or the pieces did genuinely pop off as well at that London event. So they've never quite looked the same since. Yeah, I don't disagree though. Like G2 should cruise past quite a few of the teams here. I haven't actually looked directly at their bracket, but Passion UA and then NIP and Liquid on the other side. NIP, Liquid are good tests, I think, for someone like G2, but they should beat them. I think that's fair to say. So they're definitely a high value pick, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Centaurus and Aurora were right there.
The games that they're not playing Aurora.
No, I know,
Aurora,
but
Aurora playing Game Legion, then probably Parivision. I don't know the way they played in the last bounty. We'll get into it eventually, I'm sure. But yeah, G2 Passion UA I think is a winnable game. Unfortunately, Passion UA just not been that impressive, have they? Like they've just not really shown us that much. And then afterwards, it's not an easy or free game, but I think it's just winnable. Like I think they just have winnable then winnable. So I do think there's a gap that's closing up between them and sort of the field that's behind them. Parivision for me was a part of that field behind them for a while, but like even the heroics of the world, like currently I feel like the vibe is they've not got that clear separation. No one in this real favorite section has that much of a separation from the underdogs beneath them. That's why I think Skriv, you don't really give a shit that Parivision moved to favorites, do you? Really? Like no. That gap. It doesn't feel that wide in this field.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Does it come back around to me?
It does. Now it's back to you, Skriv, with back-to-back picks. So who do you want to take?
So I have one favorite, two underdogs, just to be that's where we're at. I think I will start with the favorite. I know technically I've already got one, but in my head, this is where I was going to, whatever. And Michael did just touch on it a little bit as well. I think this favorite side of things is difficult because, yes, maybe in terms of where standings are, but like there's a couple teams in here that I don't really like the look of compared to, I think it's very losable for them to the quote unquote underdogs. Anyway, Michael touched on it a little bit. I'm going to go that Aurora direction, I think, here. Maybe between them and like Passion UA for me, but I'll lean towards the Aurora side of things, just because again, with the end of the season for them, obviously, I think up and down, right? Like really quite a confusing closeout for a lot of people. Bucharest win, maybe indeed small banana cut, but it's difficult to say. And then, just going into the major, nothing really there for them. I think a lot of people expected a bit more out from this team. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think the small change coming in is decent. They definitely did need a bit of a change. I think that again, maybe harping on a similar point, but the leadership angle is a little scary at the moment, and just what they're able to kind of create. We've seen the ceiling of this team. It does feel like potentially they were in that spot of knocking on the door and competing with some of the top teams and being a bit scary and proving that they're capable of making runs. Also had the EWC run, right? Like they prove that they're definitely capable, but they're just not very fresh from one tournament to another. they become very readable. I think they lean a bit too much on the Xantares, and he's getting older. He's getting less capable as his career goes on. You feel like it should have happened already. Is, you know, credit to him that he's still going and still able to control games in the way that he does. But I think that they're a solid team at the moment. I think that they should be fine for this stage. But what I will say on the more, you know, deep conversation about this squad is that I think their days of competing and making those deep runs and whatnot are potentially coming to a close. I don't think that this edition of Soulfly is really going to turn things around. He ultimately looked pretty flat at Blast as well. So, you know, I don't think that they're really able to sort of rely on him as being this savior. It is also a testament to like the Turkish scene. Like, what do they do from here? Another pretty shrewd organization. Do they maybe want to try and push them to make some international moves? There's not all that much talent available or left in the Turkish region, I feel like. So, you know, it's a difficult time for a team like this. They'll be fine. I'm confident in the pick for this stage, personally, but I do think that there's maybe a bit of room for this, or rather teams will push this team aside. You know, when you've got the Parivision, the Heroic, the Passion UA, the FUT, right? All these kinds of teams in this stage, for example, I think that Aurora will kind of get brushed to the side a little bit in certain tournaments. There's going to be a few tournaments this year where they just sort of go out dead last, you know, or just lose that silly game that never should have been a problem for them, and their consistency of making a better run or scaring a top team is going to wane, I feel, into this season.
Yeah, I don't want to be seen as just like a shit IGL sympathizer, because I've tried to stick my neck out for some before, you know, whether that was Art or Anaphany. You know, I didn't necessarily stick my neck out for Boomage, but I still won't do that. But I do think Major calls the way Aurora want to play. If I think about Xantares and Woxic and how they want to play, Woxic even tried in-game leading back in the day with Eternal Fire, when they hadn't picked up Major yet, and they were, you know, exploring. Immor cold for a little bit, and then Woxic cold for a little bit. And they were really trying to find a fit. Yeah. The only one that really worked was Major, and it was because he started calling a little bit more of these looser up-tempo rounds, the more fight-oriented, set up on explosive peaks type plays that actually brought Aurora into the forefront of our conversation and started to take, you know, the Turkish scene seriously. Because I think, unfortunately, if you try and upset that balance and be a bit more tactical and a bit more slow-paced, far more, you know, I guess, calculated in your approach, I've seen that blow up for Aurora so many times before. You know, I don't think it's for a lack of trying. They've tried exploring those types of rounds. It's just when I've seen them get opening picks and then go into those tempo execs and then just lose a round in a man advantage. So I think Madrid's in a weird spot where he almost can't enact change too much without upsetting the potential pool of players that he has into bringing up basically like no-name Turkish pieces, which just doesn't have the same allure, and you don't have the same confidence that they'll be able to deliver it in that way. So I think he's in a bind. I think they're both in a bind, to be honest. I don't think Aurora can necessarily find a better in-game leader than Major, and I don't think Major can call a more tactical game without potentially upsetting the balance of his star pieces. What I will say is that Wicadia and Soulfly are both like astute pickups. Like they seem like good attitude pickups. Soulfly is a very sort of, in my opinion, Swiss Army knife type player. Like hasn't necessarily always thrived in one role. Has had to go from different teams where he's taking different roles, like star player on Fireflux towards the end of his time there, but was a role player on Sangal before and played like anchor spots, was supportive on T sides. He's kind of done a little bit of everything, and so I think the hope is that he will be the most soldier-like player on this roster. Like every time Major tells him to do something, he will do it because he's adaptive, where some of the other pieces are a little bit more stubborn. And I think Wicadia is probably of a little bit of the same ilk, but far more thrust into the fray and thrust into the action. You know, Wicadia has actually saved them from looking like a completely garbage team as of late. And in the absence of Xantares, you know, you need somebody that serves as that core, because in theory, Wicadia, Xantares, Woxic should be enough to get past most. You don't need 4-star players.
Raw ability wise, those three, fantastic, right?
Yeah, I mean, they can win rounds.
Sorry, but what the fuck is Softlight doing here? Like, I'm sorry, I had to interrupt almost, because I was like, I'm just pissed off because Aurora just annoyed me. I was joking about this on Retake the Week when the move got announced. I was just like, what's next? Like, seriously, who's the next entry fragger from Turkey they can just slam into, like, Magus spots, I guess, and then just have fucking Woxic call again? Because this move is just... It's like they don't understand what they have, who they are, and, like, they're trying to make it worse. Like, they're trying to... You're correct, Yumi, I agree with you. Like, he does call the way they'd want to play. But a teacher doesn't, you know, teach kids how to skateboard in maths just because the kids want to fucking skateboard. Like, this annoys me. Like, yeah, I get the idea that you want to keep packing up and grouping and just hitting hard and execing and just playing off your strengths, but the move has just rendered them so like single-faceted and like beyond readable. Like, Jota at least had a certain start to the way and the tempo and the way he played, where you could argue like they have this sort of lurker who can kind of make some plays that can actually vary things a bit and change the way they look. But they're still a team who've not shown a true capacity to use a default, take map control properly, pivot off the back of that sort of map control, change up the look. They're just very straight line. Like, this is the idea. We're going to get to it with this straight fucking path, and that's going to be it. Can they outshoot this stage? Yes. Will they? They better. Like, they better have everyone firing at 100%. Otherwise, they're going to get embarrassed by Heroic, like, straight out the gates. So I have so many concerns with this team. And the first one is, firstly, the role fit for the change they made. And the second one is, if the roles fit in the new way they're looking to play, have they become more predictable than they were before? They just dropped a map to Hotu. They dropped an entire series to Gamer Legion with a stand-in.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It's ugly. And Skriv, I respect the pick. Like, in terms of they should still be good. They should still out-talent people. I hope they don't. I just hope they don't, because this kind of GMing needs like some sort of karmic punishment.
It's valid. It is valid. I think, there's a little bit in there with sort of also like recycling talent. You have to bear in mind like where Eternal Fire was and whatnot. They just seem really quite stubborn to not move out of their circle, even just a little bit. I think, again, you know, still trying to build up some Turkish talent. It seems like the scene is keen enough, right? They have enough fans. They have enough viewership,
we hear from
backing,
them a lot, don't
you know,
we?
whatever. Yeah, exactly. But it seems like in terms of a depth of talent, is it not quite being nurtured? Is it like, you know, the French scene in 2015 where it's like, you know, Happy is God. In this case, it's like Major is God. If you don't kiss the ring, you don't get in the conversation, kind of thing. Not quite sure. It doesn't seem like that type of guy. So, you know, I think that on your point, they definitely do need to either A, take some chances, or really seriously restart like a Turkish academy system or whatever it may be. But at the moment, I think that they had Eternal Fire, and maybe Eternal Fire had a bit of that and had this kind of complete image and, you know, the streaming, and they had like their own facility and everything for a little while. But I think maybe since the Aurora pickup, maybe since grabbing some bag and getting some wins and, you know, things like, or some deep runs, they've lost a little bit of that just hunger to deeply improve the Turkish scene and whatnot. And if you're going to stick to the full lineup in that sense, you need a bit more than this. It needs to look either stronger from, you know, you have that ability to pluck someone from the depths and be like, they'll fit into our team and we know them well and we've done, you know, local lands or we've got our scouting or whatever it may be, or you need to make the brave move. And I think enough of the players within this team would be capable of speaking English, and communication is not going to be an issue. You just have to make the brave move to go outside of that circle and pluck some proper talent, right? Like, again,
Yeah.
Aurora seem to have the money. There's so many teams even at this tournament that we've already talked about that you could just yoink somebody.
Not everybody is built for tactical Counter-Strike. We saw what the Bad News Eagles became when they tried to add tactics to their Counter-Strike. It got bad. Not everyone can play that type of tempo. Some people are just not wired that way. And I think there is a bit of that in Aurora. Even when Zentaris was on Big Clan, I wouldn't necessarily say that he was a big part of the tactical influence, or even necessarily always the best soldier within those systems. He was, in fact, he was just the X factor. If he wanted to do something, they have a flash for him. But I don't think it was, Tabson, Zentaris, you need to take this peek. We've got this flash. We're lining it up. It's like, Zentaris, I'm going to peek. Okay. So yeah, some people just, some players aren't built for it like that. And I think you can still succeed in that vein. I mean, we've seen FaZe make it with some pretty poor tactics to grand finals of majors out of nowhere. So sometimes you can just power through it. But yeah, Aurora need a resurgence. Otherwise, liquidation of the organization or at least this team could be very inevitable. Because I imagine Aurora's investment into this core, it's largely dependent on them continuing to make the major cycle and competing in these tier 1 events to get eyeballs on them. Because with Valve stepping in, there was a particular gambling sponsor that was on the Aurora logo that is no longer there. In fact, pretty much any logo that's not directly attached to teams isn't allowed on the logos anymore. So there could be some funding that gets cut for certain things. I'd imagine. That's part of the eyeballs. It's part of the engagement that you want with the audience as a sponsor, at least.
Yeah, I mean, also there's always the factor when we talk about these roster moves. You lose the fan base. The second Aurora's not full Turkish, it seems the fan base dies. Like, I've broached the topic a couple of times. I've received comments similar to, we'd rather be dead than not be full Turkish. Fans, obviously, not the players. Perfectly sane thing to say. Least radical Turkish opinion I've heard in a long time. Because holy crap, they have some special thoughts online. But yeah, that's just going to be another one of the difficulties in trying to make an Aurora change. Like, you've always got to factor in the popularity contest.
It's so fascinating because I don't remember seeing that many of those threads or those comments when Zentaris was on Big Clan and abandoned the Turkish scene, so to speak. But
to be fair, he was also Turkey for Germany. Like, most of them were kind of like, just
sure.
Yeah.
there's a joke in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yes, those accounts, those messages you received, always based in Frankfurt. It's weird. Skriv, you have another pick?
Yes. And
Underdogs
now
left.
Underdogging, right.
Yes.
Okay. That's, yeah.
Yep, that's the term.
Whatever
bad.
floats your boat.
Yeah, sure. No judgment here. And in terms of no judgment, I think with what remains from the teams, I go towards Heroic here. I think it just kind of feels like the logical choice. Still a few question marks, around what this roster kind of looks like full strength, for sure, right? Because we've just not really seen that at Blast. But I don't know. I still think this is on paper a really solid kind of team. I think that they should do well within this stage. Again, another sort of very young team, a few nice pieces. I think that Krisen as an IGL is going to be a really sort of solid guy to turn towards and hopefully be able to sort of lead a team like this. He's done it a few different times now with, a ragtag bunch that you don't rightly know what you're going to get out of them. And maybe they do need a bit of pushing in the right direction. But yeah, I know this is a team that you guys have harped on about and talked about a fair bit. I don't have too much to really add to their argument. I think that they have these prospects, they have these what ifs, and they have a lot of names on here that at one point people were quite excited about. They just haven't quite been able to make it work all at once. But again, as mentioned, we've still not quite seen them full strength into this season. So maybe that all changes. And they did have a lot of fun at Blast in places. I think, Youngstar just messing around and still finding success on the AWP and everything was kind of funny. So I hope that this is their first proper actual first tournament and they are more prepared. And it's also where a team like Heroic with Tobers behind them, with some of the minds within this team like a Krisen and like maybe the Nilo influence as well. I think that they'll be a bit more prepared because you know your matchups, you know what you're coming up against, and this is their bread and butter. The sort of gatekeeper tier 1.5 type teams are where Heroic, I feel, tend to thrive.
This is rightly like an awkward sort of team to talk about because we saw them play Blast Bounty. They made it through to the LAN portion. They then immediately lose to that Furia side, who again needed every last bit of Molodoy's power to get through the series they played. But it's a strange sort of thing because you want to give them credit for that, but at the same time, you're like, we know it's a bit weird. Like we had Youngstar AWPing, no Alcaren. Now Alcaren's back in. Now I want to be thankful that I see like a 130 something rated Nilo, and he's paired up with Susp again, and that duo has been very successful in the past, and maybe that'll enable him to sort of replace some of the impact they lost when Tanir left, and they never truly found again. xCloud also had a pretty good start. I mean, in classic xCloud style, it's 2 something rated maps and a 0.8, and then a few in between, and averages out. It's pretty good. Like he just all over the shop. But it's a team that excites me. Like Tobiz bringing in Krisen feels like he's just like, this was his guy on the academy. He wanted to play with him anyway. He saw the opening, took it. Hopefully that means it's going to be fruitful. It's going to be successful. They already have that chemistry. They already have that understanding of how they want to play. They can get it done. So, no, I mean, I think Heroic would have been one of my picks definitely deeper into this draft. They are exciting to watch. They always have been. And it's somehow maintained that excitement for me as the team has evolved and changed. It looks different in every iteration, obviously. But I feel like they've got as good a chance as anyone, really, to make the upsets happen and get through in this phase. Because, yeah, they are in the toughest sort of bracket to start off with. The Parivision game, if that's somehow a win, you play Aurora. Like on paper, these are really rough matchups. But they might, I think their time only gets easier as they go down to the lower bracket. They go down lower bracket, you play a Gamer Legion side, things look, I think, a little bit clearer, a little bit cleaner, and they can kick on from there. But no, it's a risky pick. It's a difficult team to talk about in terms of exactly how they should look. But the things we can draw from their opening games this year, I think mostly positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just, we could talk all day about the rifling on this roster because they definitely have a lot of very competent riflers. Even Krisen, as an in-game leader, is actually kind of maybe the underappreciated part about him is that he actually does frag and do well especially on bomb sites. Like on CT sites, I feel like he does have big moments. It's always just, I always just get hung up, and maybe I just get too focused on AWPers because we are in a bit of a weird. I understand you've spoken about this. It's not necessarily as big a drought as the stats would necessarily tell you, but there is still a negative. There's a negative trend that that is happening to quite a lot of teams in their AWPing department. I've never been sold on Alcaren. I think people can make arguments for a lot of the players on this Heroic team. And I'm actually with you on a lot of it. Like you could talk up xCloud, you could talk up Krisen, you could talk up Nilo, you could talk up Susp. But I just, Alcaren. Anytime people have talked to me about them, they're like, "Oh, he's just like Icy," and I'm.
That's not the selling point. You can't make that case.
It's also just not. Yeah, that's not a positive thing. I wasn't sold on Icy either.
Months, maybe is that what they're getting at?
Yeah. I think part of it was just because Kazakhstani offer, try to make the parallel. It's not the strongest point. So I always just think what could have been if Grix was on the roster.
Yeah.
God, I do think
Yeah.
this team could have been much better, but yeah, I do have the belief that it will get better. Heroic will get better, regardless. Just because of the in-game leader swap. I believe Krizen having stronger pieces with him and sort of developing into that role. You know, whether or not Heroic are just using him to effectively sell more players, that's fairly likely.
Yeah.
But it is a good opportunity to have more pieces that we could talk about in the in-game leader role that we can potentially see move up and move down or get the promotions that I think are incredibly hard in that role. You know, getting a reputation as an in-game leader is difficult because so much of it is dependent upon success. And unless there's astute punditry or someone that's really keeping an eye on your team specifically, whether or not they notice all the intricate details or the tactics or whatever, it's hard to get that narrative out there for yourself.
Yeah, I think Heroic have been an organization kind of plagued by what you're mentioning as well. The fact that it maybe is a bit of a stopgap team for a lot of players. So that sometimes makes it hard for the players to have that buy-in at times. If it works and comes together nicely, then great, right? And they really push for the strong finishes or good runs or whatever with that particular team. But every now and then there's just an individual or two that either A, sees himself as a bit bigger than Heroic, and it's like they maybe just need like the visa power or the slight move up or a lot of eyeballs, right? Like you say, a lot of us and a lot of the astute watchers and whatnot will indeed look towards this team. So yeah, I think it's just something that when you look at the success and the length of Heroic, the team, the org or whatever, there's always this sort of hard ceiling on them. Unless the runs are kind of incredible and they're able to pull it out of nowhere. And I think, unfortunately, this season starts weird, so it's going to pick up a bit weird. I think they'll do well in this stage, right? Maybe just squeaking through, but in terms of the life cycle and the length of this team, I think that there can be some issues there. And again, they're another squad. There's so many of them in a play-in stage like this, which is just sort of the way that it works. And I suppose we don't have like that inner player belief. But they're one, maybe two moves away from like being a really impressive team. But, you know, NIP want to hold on to their pieces and FUT want to hold on to their pieces and whatnot. So obviously we're just not really going to see those moves happen. So they have to make it work with what they have.
The problem you have if you're a Gamer Legion or a Heroic or someone of that ilk is that whether or not that is your intention, your reputation will precede you. Like, if you have had pieces that then get bought up into tier 1 organizations, or more invested in buying those pieces from you, people are going to approach your organization with a bit more open-mindedness, with that being the sort of end objective, you know, using it as a stepping stone. I think PR had that interview where it's like, oh yeah, I was almost a little disappointed that I didn't, you know, get the opportunities. Of course, he's going to see it that way. He's like the best player on that team on Gamer Legion. Then he didn't end up making the roster moves. So, yeah, it's difficult. It's definitely difficult for those teams to continue building and almost to set intentions with the players that like, hey, this is long term. This is we're investing heavy, because they're not buying the biggest names. So.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's one of those things it's a tightrope they've sort of balanced for a while. So, yeah, figure it out. Somehow, so something in that org just keeps on working. Let's get into this. I've got 2 picks left, one taking now. Underdog to take, a favorite to take. I don't even know where to go, and I'm going to be honest in some of these spots, because I kind of don't want another favorite in a weird way. As awkward as that seems, you know, stand-in Liquid, 3 Max Passion UA Bait. It's a Sophie's choice where I don't want to pick any of them. Like, I have all the kids. I don't care. I don't want these. I'm going to take an underdog. I was torn between 2. I'm going to go with probably, yeah, Legacy, actually. Yeah, it was between Legacy and Astralis for me. Like one of them, I like the IGL. The other one, I think, is a very well stacked roster.
Not simple. Not
no, for some reason,
like not simple.
Having watched s1mple's team play, I'm not too thrilled.
This actually matters. I don't think they're going to let him immediately jump on Dota once like the map's finished. You know, for like a quick round. Or
Bounty he'll be rolled.
He has to focus. You know,
Bounty matters. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but he's at home. He can kind of
Rio close qualifiers matter. Sorry, they didn't play Bounty. I don't know why I'm talking about that, but Rio close qualifier does matter. Like it does just matter. They don't automatically get everything just because they bought the Saw players, and he was cheeks in one series, great in another. Like to me, that looks like him trying, but the team's just bad. Like,
yeah.
So I'm taking Legacy because look, they didn't end last season perfectly. Let's put it politely. They're a team who we massively hyped after their win and then their grand final that followed it. I'm gonna open up the team page so I know the actual event names I'm talking about. Bucharest, where they finished runner-up to Aurora, and their win was the CS Asia Championships. Not the hugest wins, but pretty exciting wins. And after that, they went to the major and just flopped. Like there's no nice way to put it. They lost a BO1 to FlyQuest, which is whatever, but then best of threes to Bait and Parivision. Just a very unimpressive end to the year. Probably then made a lot worse by the way they started this year with losses to MIBR and Sharks in domestic play. And I don't care what anyone says about matchups and you shouldn't judge them based on MIBR's barely Brazilian anymore, hasn't existed as a roster really at all. There's no matchup history. And the Sharks one is a bit of a domestic thing, but they're also a team that's so far beneath you should take care of. So yes, it's not a great start, but it's legacy. Just look at the roster. Dumao, Lato. We've been talking about these guys since they were, actually like 16, 17, on Godsent, on other rosters like that. Impressing, upsetting. They're still together, they're still fragging, they're still very impressive. Lato especially. I mean, Dumao, sure, as an opening's pretty good. But Lato's really coming to his own as a player, really, in this team. And I think that's going to be the main inspiration for my selection, really, is his abilities that he showed towards the end of last year. And then off the back of the success they had, we noticed Nissim outperforming his roles massively. Lux calling a solid game that has been perfect. He hasn't magically become the greatest Brazilian IGL, but he at least showed us that potential last year, that he could lead a team with a fairly interesting and dynamic sort of play style and playbook. Like they weren't just running straight B hits, it wasn't that kind of thing. They actually had some variety, some complexity, and it was effective. Need to see that continuing in this season. Need to see that some variation coming through. But overall, I was fairly impressed with them. So this is a team that has a lot of things in place that I want to see from a team that I think needs to outperform the underdog tag. They have talents, they have some solid calling, and they have also probably like a good history of beating solid rosters. Like ignoring the flop that I brought up, they have wins over Astralis, FlyQuest, Pain, Saw, and Bucharest. In the CS Asia Championships, I believe they picked up at least one more win that was very important. They beat 3D Max, they beat Heroic, they beat FUT. Like in terms of this bracket especially, they beat some teams that are important to have beaten. And they beat 3D Max in a best of three. Like they have best of three wins prior to their end of year disaster that are important for this field. So I'm going to rely on Legacy to show up in the way they did during their best events last season. Like I understand the negativity that there could be associated with this team, but I'm very optimistic about the quality of the player and, of course, the ceiling they have. So, yeah, betting on Legacy again.
Yeah, been a fan of Legacy just because of, honestly, the career arc for Lux, actually. I always look at Lux as the key point where Payne started going downhill. After they removed him from the roster and he had to go on his own ventures for him to take up in-game leading and actually kind of lead in fairly similar roles to Biguzera. It does feel like it's fairly inspired, and doing it with a whole different roster and earning the respect of pieces that we have been talking about for quite some time. That Dumao Lato conversation has been perpetuated within the South American circuit for quite some time. It's just nice to see that he's had that career trajectory and it's worked so quickly for him, especially making that transition at a fairly young age. Not everyone is willing to take that responsibility, especially when you are more aggressive seen as maybe a bit more of like a star player type. Him gaining that confidence and making that move, yeah, it's just cool to watch. But I do agree with the sentiment that Nissim seemingly getting a lot out of his roles, and also just genuinely having like back-to-back like life events. That is a positive in that maybe he has got that extra in him, but I do see them as a bit anomalous. Like that was a really, really good month for Nissim. I don't know that that's necessarily sustainable, but hell, if it can be replicated even slightly, that does give this team a lot more extra punch, a few more win conditions. I do think is needed with the way that they call. They're a little bit chaotic, a bit more bursty. Having a few more win conditions always helps.
I think Legacy, it's kind of a team, and I have really tried to go as far as possible, as long as possible within the episode without mentioning the V word, because I know you're not a fan, T, but I think there's a little bit of the vibes associated with this team. That's my one. That's my one that I'm gonna use. My one vibes.
You get the V pass.
Yeah, the V pass, brilliant. But yeah, I think I do worry, man. We touched a little bit on like this sort of coasting thing that I've talked about. I think this is maybe a team that could enter into that if they're not careful. A year ago, I don't think that they were necessarily, maybe a little bit longer than that, they were necessarily like expecting to be able to make high heights and be able to contend for tournament victories. So I think they have to be very, very careful not to sort of get back into that sort of mindset and also, like everyone was saying for a while, is it that flash in the pan? Is it the few deep runs and whatnot? They also kind of had a drop off in the middle of this excitement, and then managed to resurge a little bit when the next like major cycle came about, I think, and make the run, win the tournament. So I do worry a little bit, to play the devil's advocate here, because you two seem quite up on them, which is fair enough. I do agree from a firepower explosive kind of standpoint. They can be very, very hard to deal with, and just really one of those teams that can throw the textbook, as it were, out the window in terms of how to like plan engagements and how to take those engagements, and just a lot of freedom to move through smokes or to make a questionable flank on 30 HP, but somehow they're able to make it work. And there was a lot of that at CAC, I think, especially playing in a LAN environment for sort of half that tournament as well, like an arena environment. So, I think that they can sometimes get the better of teams with those types of moves, but that's the one thing that I'd maybe harp on as well. On the other side is you have to stay fresh, you have to stay predictable, you need to be self-aware of what you're doing around those types of plays, because otherwise you become very readable. That being said, I do still think that a lot of the teams in this stage will kind of maybe forget about Legacy and what they did last year. I know that sounds a bit silly, but I think that they may well look at some of the bigger names, right, in terms of the orgs and in terms of other players and IGLs and things like this that you've got in this stage, to be wary of and to be careful of and what they're capable of. And I think that Legacy may well get overlooked. And
Sure.
again, could be that one team, as they have a number of tournaments now, just kind of 13-3 every map. You know what I mean? Like just really uncompetitive games in their favor if I'm kind of correct on how other teams view them at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think it's unfair to say that we're not the only ones that suffer from recency bias. Players are definitely more than capable of suffering from recency bias themselves. If you ever look at some of these interviews where it's like, who's the best young talent? Hell, the HLTV Top 20 is a great example, when they always go, prospect or someone for the future. It's like almost always someone that's been in very very recent conversations, bar maybe one or two people that are a bit more ear to the ground or have decided to select somebody from their local circuit. So recency bias will be a factor. I do think that is something to consider. But I will say Legacy almost feel. Maybe this is a weird comparison because they don't necessarily play the same way, but I actually think the fact that Nissim had those big events was actually similar to Parivision with AW. Like having somebody that can close out and have these big moments for you is great. Wouldn't it be great if you had that far more frequently? I think without that extra threat on the table, Legacy actually do lose some of the ability to scale up. I think with Parivision they've maybe found it. Maybe it's too early to say whether or not that's sustainable with Shui. But role wise and fit wise, it does seem to make sense. Finding someone that could fulfill Nissim's positions and maybe have a bit more output actually probably could be the next step for Legacy in terms of actually building up properly. Because listen, yeah, I do agree. They throw caution to the wind is how I would phrase it for Legacy. They definitely love a jump through a smoke, but they do couple it with the flash. They're always like, hey, let's do this. Let's just flash behind me. I'm just gonna run at this guy through the smoke and con. They do like a couple of those plays, and yeah, they definitely catch teams off because there are far too many that don't throw caution to the wind. Instead, they are in a bunker somewhere defending themselves from that wind.
Yeah, pretty good way to talk about this team and the way they actually like to take those risks. Because everyone takes risks in their own way, and they are, bold and almost Brazilian, I guess, in terms of the way the scene generally likes to play. Like, if you watch the lower levels, very confident. But I think with enough planning for it to all make sense. And that's why I like them. Skriv, no, YouM3, back-to-back picks.
It's me.
Let's get into it. Who do you like?
I'm just going to go with Astralis. I'm not going to mess around here. They're an underdog now because of the reseeding. Yeah, take that. Stare believer and enjoyer. Grimmy Renard tried to peddle us the whole Ryu theory.
To be fair, he looked like a genius for one game. Like, for the opening games of the stage, he looked like an absolute genius. And he made that clear on Twitter. Like, he called himself a genius. And then it all came crashing down. But no, I mean, the Ryu belief, it wasn't terribly unfounded.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's something there, and I think even Fozy as an AWPer, listen, I think it's just, I do agree with Grimmy's assessment. It's just nice to see him not get screwed over on a roster, and it's likely to have some time to properly develop, because he actually should be in a better place than where he was when he was with NIP, for example. Just in terms of the experience that he's had, the type of player that he's been on some of the previous teams, whether that's Rare Atom or Wildcard again, or Nine. He's I think displayed some of that aggressive combative AWPing, but also some of the more sedentary position based. So he's had experiences with both, and so it's kind of up to Astralis and Hooksy how they want to utilize him, because I think he will be a fairly moldable piece in that regard. That, and you've got Ryu, who can be explosive rifler. I'm a big stare enjoyer, so he's always getting a positive in my books, even if I don't think he's necessarily star capable. I think he is, like, he's supposed to be your secondary or your third star where he overperforms. I think Astralis have enough. I just like the cut of this team and the way that they have called in some of the previous rosters, and yeah, maybe it'll take a bit of time to get up to speed with the newer additions, but Hooksy is good at getting pieces to perform above standard, especially when they are buying into his calling. So that's the belief I have for him.
Yeah, I think as well, this is a team that kind of now is on a new beat, on a completely new thing. They're not trying to salvage pieces of old Astralis. They're not trying to rebuild legacy and find what they had all those years ago. Whereas I feel like there was always the ghost of like the old Astralis just kind of lurking in the shadows behind this team. And I think now it is that fresh slate, and they're able to come in with newer ideas. And indeed, there's maybe not someone that you have to be a bit careful of. From a business standpoint, they just need success wherever it comes from, it seems, at the moment. maybe this sort of sale of device and whatnot is sort of the only thing that's maybe keeping them afloat at the moment. So, I think it's a bit of a dangerous time there. But in terms of the team, yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with you that they should be able to make something work here. There is a good mixture of experience, and you have someone like Fozzy, who's like a really solid journeyman player now, it feels like, still a pretty young guy, but he's been around a bit. He's been in different rosters. He's probably had different levels of control in those rosters, different expectations and whatnot. And I think that he genuinely
different levels of English in those rosters as well.
Yeah, true.
you had to learn a little Chinese, buddy.
Yeah. So I feel like he's a very colored player in that sense. He's had a very extensive career already. And I think could be a great sort of second voice beside Hooksy here. So I think that if they're able to kind of activate some of these pieces a little bit better than previous rosters and previous IGLs in particular, I think certainly they could be in a good spot. And Hooksy as an IGL as well is unafraid to take a step back. He understands that he is kind of a second player and that he's there to facilitate people. And we're in kind of an era of like a lot of IGLs trying to take a bit more of the limelight. And certainly within Astralis, the history that they've had with IGLs has kind of painted that as well, that it's like, a little bit more about them and their system than it is allowing the individuals to strive, as it were, and to make that space for them and to kind of get out of the way.
I do love that you bring up the sort of the ghost of Astralis past, because it did seem like it was always, hey, we could still do it again, right? We just bring it back again. We're gonna run it all the way back to the major, and it was worse every time.
So yeah, Astralis is a weird little team where, like, I like pieces on the team. Like, I'm a big Hooksy fan, I always was. I stood, as one of the few people in his sort of corner when he was getting sledged like crazy on G2. And to this day, I still think he's done wondrous things with Danish rosters over and over again, including last season's team that had no right winning anything in terms of games, let alone tournaments. So I was always on his side. I look at this roster, I'm like, yeah, Fuzi I think will be better than Device towards the end, eventually, when he gets comfortable. And Ryu, I think, has a lot of potential, huge ceiling. But the debut did not quite go as planned. It was a sketchy win against a very bad-looking Fnatic, who've also gone to prove afterwards that, yes, we were right to be concerned about the way they looked in that game. Like, it wasn't just a one-off disappointment against this Astralis. It was just a team that doesn't look entirely ready for tier 1.5 competition. Like, they need to go way back down the rankings just to climb back up. So the Astralis debut was not perfect. That being said, I just think the pieces have so much potential that I'm still excited for the pick, for the team, for the potential on the team. It's just, I feel like they might need another event or two to fully integrate, to get back to the same level they were looked in terms of coordination previously. Like, as a unit, the old Astralis, whilst weak as hell, executed at a high level. They didn't have star riflers, star AWPing, star anything. They had a Hooksy and a Dream, right? And that was enough. And that they were able to put together little runs, little wins, and little events. So, yeah, I wouldn't have picked them today. It's why I didn't. That's why I ended up going with that legacy pick. I get everything in their favor, and I hope it all comes true. I just have my doubts about it happening now. Like, I think now's just a bit too early for them. They're just not quite ready yet, because there's a lot that needs to go right for them to be a top team again.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's unfair. I think that's, maybe I just have flawed picking philosophy at the start of the year, but that's also kind of how I approach Bounty as well. There's a lot of, for the season, I see this maybe being good, but for now, maybe it's a bit too soon. So I understand the reservations. I have a favorite to pick, so I'm just gonna go with something that I think is easy, because hell, I love this player. I'm going with Liquid. I love Crimbo. I'm a big Crimbo enjoyer. Merry Crimbo, everybody. It is time for him to come back into the server, and I'm excited for it. I did think that Crimbo was going to be somebody that should be looked at for a lot of teams. I'm surprised that he didn't end up in some roster conversations, that he didn't essentially get to join one of these teams prior to this arrangement with him replacing NAF for an event or maybe two, depends on the circumstances. But it'll be a good time to put him on display because, God, was he the best part of Big by the time towards the end? It was him or JDC, and
for a while.
It was rough to watch, genuinely. Tabson didn't even look serviceable on that roster anymore. The calling looked all over the place, and it was basically those two had to perform heroics. And if not, the game was done. It wasn't even competitive, and they'd still frequently lose, even if those two did show up. So we're seeing, Big at the moment with Blame F do quite well right now. And if you're Crimbo, you're probably a little sour that they seem to be rising through the ranks where they seem like on a downward trajectory. Have I made the wrong decision? I just hope he puts himself in the shop window and does so quite well, because I think he can be an incredible late round adjustment support piece. Did quite a lot on that big roster, but I actually hope they allow him to take engagements and set him up properly, because his mechanics are so strong. Like, Crimbo is an exceptional individual player that should be on a top team.
Yeah. My small understanding with where maybe the move came from and whatnot, I think that Crimbo wanted other things and maybe priced himself out a little bit as well. If that makes sense, that it's like if they wanted to hold on to him, they would have to make that speak money or whatever, however you want to put it.
Well, I mean, he's benched. They still have him, but he's just benched.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is it. So yeah, I think certainly for me, I also like Crimbo. I think definitely, in that sort of roster that they had with him, definitely one of the better pieces, one of the more impressive pieces. When he was kind of left on his own, I think certainly seems like quite a stoic character, let's say. Maybe not the most communicative as well, so maybe that could be something that has hindered him and his prospects and his hopes and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hope he doesn't get picked up by Liquid, though. Just seems like the team at the moment where dreams go to die. It's kind of insane. There's some sort of curse over this team where I think, Ultimate, all right, a bit inconsistent and all this kind of stuff. Maybe not the AWPer that you'd want, but in a world of AWPers finding their identity and rifling being more prominent, whatever, it still feels like the roster should be easily competing in the top 10. When you've got like Elige and NAF and Rookie of the Year and a major finalist, it's just kind of insane. And it's also not the first time that we've maybe looked at this team and the players that they've picked and gone, yeah, it should be good. And then they're just not, just kind of the most mid team.
Yeah.
Maybe ever for the past 18 months, 2 years nearly and whatnot. So yeah, I just think there's something wrong with Liquid as I don't know, as an entity. So yeah, I hope that they kind of keep their hands off Crimbo in the long term, and I'd much prefer him to maybe get moved up to a phase or potentially really boost someone like Heroic or something like that in the near future. But we'll see. For sale sign, hopefully, is going to be out in this stage 1 at the very least.
They have held their head above water even through the trials and tribulations.
I know it's true. It is true. Yeah, it's kind of wild that they can also do that.
The fact that they've remained in the top 20 really while capitulating and being pretty bad. I mean, we hold them to a higher standard than top 20. Right. That's where a lot of the criticisms will come from, especially the players. But yeah, they're trucking along. They've been trucking along.
Yeah, this Liquid side they've gone through some lows of late. And I honestly, when I saw firstly, it was leaked as a roster move, not as a stand-in situation for Crimbo. And I was like, I just got immediately irate, because what the fuck are you doing, Liquid? I know NAF had some disappointing moments last year, but to say he's the first player you cut is to not understand your roster in the slightest and be completely idiotic. So either he was getting bought or this was a stand-in situation. And thankfully, it was a stand-in situation. That's fine with me. Crimbo, I think he's a tidy little player, tidy little late-round player, good anchor, provides value in terms of those positions. It's a classic case of you've got the right stand-in for this position. Like, you've got the exact right piece you'd want. He can advertise himself. You guys still have a chance to be competitive. I think Liquid should be not quite as good as you'd expect, or as good as they'd expect themselves to be, because it is still a stand-in at the end of the day. But it's given them the best opportunity, I think, to perform, given the situation. So yeah, I kind of like this Krimbos like sort of arrangement overall. Ultimate's still completely shit, but that's, again, so many teams just don't rely on their AWPer for the majority of their round wins. And Ultimate's one of those guys where it's just, he's not the be all and end all for this roster, despite everything. All the things we can say about him not being good enough, it doesn't really matter in the end. They're going to be relying on Elige. They're going to be relying on Crimbo as well now that he's come in, and Nerds to find moments and spaces. It should all work pretty effectively. So, same win cons. Everything's still the same with Liquid. I think they were looking, like I said before the end of last year, they shouldn't make any moves this year for at least 3 months. Like, I was like, just leave it. If you're going to make a move, yeah, sure. If you want to replace Ultimate with Dexter, go for it. But otherwise, just leave the rifles alone. Like, there was nothing that needed changing. It was getting slowly better. It was looking, event by event, like a more polished and proper CS team. I expect that to somewhat continue here, despite the little blip on the radar that is the stand-in situation. It's just a tough bracket for them to make it through. To be clear, like, if they lose to NIP, they then face like Passion UA in that lower game. It's not quite an easy path through. That's why I was tentative to pick them.
The truly tragic part about Ultimate is that it's not like they're not setting him up to take opening fights on CT sides or like find picks, or he doesn't get chances on execs. He just misses a lot.
He's just not good enough.
Yeah, he genuinely will miss a lot, or, you know, where other AWPers are prepared for a timing on a flash, he is not. It's just, yeah, he's out of his, it just looks so out of his depth.
And on T side, he's just a util dispenser. Like, he's not active and present and effective. Like, he doesn't call his own number, and then when he does have moments or places and spaces where he just doesn't hit the shot. So yeah, no, Ultimate's just not good enough. That's plain and simple. They should have been in the conversation for Grix. They should have been looking into getting Dexter off the bench. He's literally free. You don't actually have to pay for him. You can just bring him in anytime you want. They should have been sniffing around some of these tier 2 prospects over the course of the offseason. The one thing I do want to say is some people are going to try and clown. If Crimbo plays well, people are going to try and clown Rainwaker with this sort of with this game, or the results, or whatever happens. I'm just going to get ahead of it. It's not the same. It's just not the same. Rainwaker was not in his ideal spots, not set up to succeed. It was a disaster, a clusterfuck from day one. Do not compare it. Because I know someone out there's going to be a little cunt. He's going to come in and be like, look at Rainwaker, he fucking shit. It's like, I'm going to hit one of you kids. Like, it's just not the same situation. Crimbo set up to succeed. I hope he does. I hope this Liquid side does succeed. I'm off the completely hate watching Liquid sort of trip that a lot of people
sad. It's just sad.
It is just a bit sad.
Really. Yeah.
We've reached acceptance, and now all we want is for things to get better.
Get better, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my final pick of this show. Let's see. I've got some real tasty favourites to pick between. 3D Max, Passion UA, Bait. Give me Bait. Give me Bait.
Who even is this guy?
Who the fuck is even this kid? What's the name again? I forget it every time I say it.
Segukawa.
Like, whatever. Give me a kid obsessed with anime and an AWP. Like, you know, what could go wrong? Like, that's the dream combo, isn't it? Like, a weeb with a sniper rifle. This should work just fine. Yeah, they didn't have much going for them, and they've done what I've been begging every team to do. If your AWPer is mid as fuck anyway, or in this case just bad, just pick up a random kid. Like, what do you lose? Either he is the next Monacy, and good job on your academy scout, or he's just the same player as your AWPer you had before. Like, you've not really gone that far down as far as your overall ability to win. So, yeah, I like the fact they took this risk. It also helps their opening matchup is NRG, and then the winning game, they're either playing Astralis or Pain. Not saying they could be favourite into that game with a random academy kid, but there's a chance. There is a chance. They have a puncher's chance with the firepower they have on this roster. MPL, Kensizor, they look fantastic at the major as a rifle firepower duo. Senthiel is never terrible. He's never brilliant, but he's never terrible. If Segukawa is even decent, this team will actually go straight through. So why not? Why the hell not? Game the system a little bit, look at the matchups, take a flyer on this team. I don't want to talk about 3D Max and Passion UA right now. Give me bait.
I can't wait for the Sugekawa will humble OC threads, and it'll just be like, who wins, 16-year-old random Ukrainian kid or OC, NA's best AWP?
Yeah, NA's best AWP versus random Ukrainian child. All of us are putting our money on the Ukrainian, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just crazy. Like, we'll see how he is, obviously, but it must be kind of, I suppose it's a bit quick moving, right? I would imagine as well, looking at it, they turned down Bounty. Surely they would have been invited to that.
I believe so.
But maybe just didn't have like a roster in place quick enough. So, a bit of a dangerous kind of time. Maybe it has moved a bit too fast and whatnot. Is it genuinely someone that they've had their eyes on, or is it just the fact that they kind of like contractually and, expectation wise can just move this guy, like, kind of change the dial or whatever. And there's no hassle. So we'll see whether he sticks around. Maybe this is the testing ground. They are just kind of like, yeah, okay, we've got these invites. Fuck it. We need to be playing. And we can't just like turn things down at the moment. Yeah, I love the mystery of it, just pure, no HLTV, no picture or anything. I think the only kind of thing I saw is that he played in advanced last season, and they did make it to playoffs, which is not,
it's not nothing.
It's fair. It's fair enough, because there's a few teams down there that you might see playing in your CCTs or your ECLs, but well, no, they wouldn't be playing in ECL, but they kind of play in the CCTs, that kind of realm. And there's a few names in advance that just are a bit lazy with their ESEA, Face It League, whatever it is now, sort of ranking. So it's nothing to shake a stick at, the fact that he and the squad were able to make the playoffs, and they went out in the first round, I think, something like that. So yeah, I feel like there's got to be a little bit to this kid, and just kind of come in, no pressure, and see what he can do, see what Bait can do around him. Again, feeds into our argument of the AWPer. Do you need him? Maybe not so much. And I think as well, it'll be very interesting. Maybe I'm forcing this narrative on him in particular, but I do feel there's a new generation of players coming up, right? Like this kind of 13 to 18 bracket at the moment, where obviously like a newer generation, but I don't think you can get away with, if you are a player on the come up and you're joining teams and you're serious about this whole thing, that you can be like, I'm an AWPer and that's what I do, right? I don't think you can insert yourself into teams and professional-ish, semi-pro-ish situations and only gravitate towards this one weapon. I think you need now to have a good proficiency to be considered on the AK as well, right? On the rifles as well. So I feel like we might see a little bit more to this guy. Again, like I said, I'm forcing this narrative on him a little bit, but I feel like we might see a little bit more to this guy as a complete player from the get-go, just because I think that that's where these younger, newer guys are going to have to prove themselves if Face It is going to be the way that you pick up new talent, rather than the leagues and the academy system or whatever that we were hoping to have but now don't. So yeah, I'm quietly interested to see what another random CIS kid can do at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's not an unfair thing to put on people, because I think if we look back at early stage CS:GO, that was very, I only AWP, and that will be my gun, and long gone are the days where that's acceptable. All the top
it wasn't
level
even acceptable
elite...
in Go, really, was it?
Yeah, but when they had that AWP, God, did that a lot of those guys did make them sing. It's just put a rifle in their hands, and they would be a liability. So
yes, but JDM was lambasted for it even back in the day, and like the other examples of guys who were AWP specific and not that great on a rifle were just not that great. They weren't bums, right? And yeah, up and comers, they have got that expectation, I think, placed on them. It's not even that they can't approach team and be like, hey, I'm only an AWPer. It's more that they themselves, they play to the meta, they play to the expectation, the mental like image you have of Counter-Strike is rifle first, and they are just playing a lot more rifles. I know someone in my Discord thread pointed out that this Sego Kawa kid has a ridiculously high headshot percentage. Clearly, rifles and all his face it pugs. Like, the skill set needs to be there, and I've got plenty of faith that it will be with this guy. He'll be able to deliver, even with a rifle, even with a pistol. Like I've seen a lot of these younger players coming up. They have a crazy first bullet, and that just kind of works. Consistency might be a problem. That's been a real point of sort of concern for me, is that some of them just don't have very consistent mechanics. They just play every gun like it's a scout, just flicking that shit across, trying to hit every single whip shot, headshot. But hey, if you land enough of them in a row, you just win a round outright, because that shit just kind of hits.
Listen, I think there's something to be said though about the fact that there is basically no tape or even record of this guy playing officials properly. Often when academy or young prospects are brought up, they're competing in open qualifiers, or they're in like a small tournament cup, or they've attended a LAN where they place quite highly into the playoffs, and so they get Liquipedia entries. This guy has nothing. He is purely face it pugger. Like you said, maybe played a season or two, a few seasons of advanced or main maybe before it, but nothing that would indicate that he is ready for the scale of competition. Because listen, there's a lot of people that compete in main, in intermediate, in advanced that are like 3.4K elo players, similar to this Segukawa kid, that are absolutely terrible when it comes to officials, because the mental of it is different. There's pressure. You're playing for elo online, sure, but there's a looseness to it. You're playing with sometimes total random, sometimes your friends, and this time there's an expectation that the practice you've put in and everything is going to translate. So I mean, I've seen, especially coming from the UK scene, there's a lot of high elo UK players that just simply don't take to team play that well. Who's to say that this guy is going to succeed? But I don't disagree with the sentiment of, why not take the risk? If your AWPer is middling, and there is this guy that's available, that's on your academy, that looks good, why not take the risk? So, I'm kind of with it. I kind of hope for something explosive. I'd love for that to happen, because Bait could do with one of those dubs. It can't be nipple and the boys, and then very little afterwards. Maybe that nipple may need to be free if they can't find a replacement on the AWP. So
we've been all over the shop this episode, from feet to double Ds to nipples. Skriv, close us out, please. Bring us home. Yes. It's been two and a bit hours. We need to finish this up before we get truly off the deep end.
It was the same last time I was on, by the way. So just bear that in mind when you ask me again in future.
I say you're the influence.
Make sure you have an evening free. No, I'm gonna to also round it out, and just because I kind of want to talk about it a little bit and maybe get some of your funny thoughts here. There is a pick that's still available. I should go there, but I'm not going to. I'll put BC Game in, just because I kind of want to talk about this team. I feel like it is a pretty funny prospect at the moment. You have s1mple, Electronic, and Taz, kind of the unholy trinity of like career implosions, it feels like.
Just to butt in quickly, you don't have to pick them just to talk about them. I'm sure we would have talked about them if we didn't. So you don't.
Well, I've done it now. I've done it now.
I'm just saying, like
I've done it. I mean, listen, I had an underdog go to favorite halfway through the show. I'm just all over the place. I'm just kind of, throwing darts at the board and seeing what happens. I just feel like it's kind of a funny prospect as well. The Portuguese players coming in, Mutiris, I don't know how he's gonna get his voice heard in this team, with his little pillow and everything, like I just feel s1mple and Electronic might rip him apart a little bit. So I don't rightly know what to make of this team. That being said, they could, if you look at the way, now I'm trying to justify this, you know what I mean? If you look at the way that they may well end up in the lower bracket, they're on that side of the bracket that could see some of these slightly stinkier, slightly less stable teams at the moment. And they might be able to make a bit of a lower bracket run. But ultimately, I just kind of wanted to get them in there, say that it's kind of funny. But there's a part of me as well. There is that hope that coming into a LAN environment, hitting the ground running, it's a prestigious event. They may well be able to pull off an upset and just give us like an exciting game. As you say, going to be a lot of eyeballs on these guys, so I hope that they can deliver at least.
Oh yeah, it's a sort of thing where I hope it works as well, because if this, for BC Game to succeed, s1mple has to be playing great CS, right? Like that's just kind of the reality of it. So if they are succeeding, yeah, we're watching like maybe not prime s1mple, but a fantastic, entertaining, aggressive s1mple, and that's something I'm gonna cherish. I'm gonna enjoy watching that. He's one of the players that got me really excited about Pro CS as a younger lad, like a decade ago. Watching him carry Flipside and Hellraiser's teams, then bringing North America to the real world. It was a fun thing to watch. So seeing some sort of return, I guess, of Counter-Strike's favorite hyper carry would be fun. I do think this team is currently massively underpowered. It's s1mple, and then it is whatever the hell else this team can be considered. Like I don't have a lot of faith in Aragorn, in Crazy, in 2026 Electronic. I have beyond doubts. I just have nothing but despair. So this will be a disappointing.
Actually,
he's basically a net negative. Yeah. So I'm already disappointed off rip in the prospects for this team. Can s1mple recover it all? Can Mutarus piece together some rounds? Maybe, but I don't see it. I don't know. Yumi, maybe help me out. Do you have more optimism than I do? Because I know we can get a bit negative on this show, but please save it.
This shit's ass. I do believe Mutarus is good at calling. I think he builds rosters so that there's a lot of buy-in. His philosophy makes sense. I mean, the teams that he's brought forward with Saw have actually punched well above their weight. I think that's fair to say. There was even a point where For the Win came into the fray, and Mutarus and Saw started pulling the pieces from that team that were a competitor within the Iberian region, and kind of built the Portuguese super team. Then, you jerks and Arrozdoj get poached, and they're starting to scramble for some of these other pieces, pulling pieces from like Rhino and some of the other organizations within the Iberian region. I'm kind of with you. I'm not sold on Crazy and Aragorn, and like I love Aragorn as a character in the movies, but I just don't think he's got the power, and I don't think Mutarus has the respect from s1mple and Electronic to call within a system. I don't know, not necessarily you ever really want s1mple playing system Counter-Strike in the first place, but it does lend itself to that Mutarus. The big positives of Mutarus's calling aren't going to come through on this roster, like just by the means of the star players that you have. I don't think it'll ever come through on this roster. It seems like a poor effort to get a core just to get a jump up, to get more opportunities to showcase BC Game on Tier 1 Counter-Strike, but I don't imagine it will last long. Like I expect BC Game to bomb out at basically every tournament for the foreseeable future. Like I just don't see them doing well.
Yeah, not a lot of positivity for this roster. Congrats, BC Game. You bought yourself a Krakow ticket. Like that's what this trio was. But immediately you lost Elo on your Rio qualifier attempt. I don't see this one being a big VRS gainer either. It's all downhill from here. You're going to have to just try to get that position locked in as quickly as possible. Somehow replace a player with someone better. Try and get some wins. It's going to be a desperate scramble for points, I think, by the...
They'll make
by the-
mid-season transfers, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, but also, will that be early enough? Will they be able to salvage it? Will they have lost too much? It's going to be tough. But yeah, they took a big jump. That's it. That's about all we can really say for them as far as this roster moves. Like, yeah, you did nick some VRS points. Congratulations. Keeping hold of them, a little more difficult. So
What?
yeah.
They're gaming the system.
Yeah. Not sure that's really going to get them that much. But all right. Those are the picks. Look, I'm going to be honest. This was a difficult field to pick through. Like, it really was. Like, in terms of who's an underdog, who's not. It changed halfway through the damn show. It was a bit of a difficult one to pick from. So let us know in the comments if you'd have done anything differently, who you'd have liked to have seen picked, or if there's someone you believe we're underrating or overrating. Lord knows. I'm sure there's a variety of
Was
opinions
Skriv scammed? Should he have been
Was
given an
Skriv
underdog
scammed?
pick? Yeah.
Yes, that's a big question.
Get in the comments.
Yes, everyone, let us know. Call for an official investigation from a neutral third party. I don't know what you want to do. But that's going to be all from us. Thank you, Skriv, for joining us and giving us your time and your thoughts. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.